Chapter 218. The so-called tile tower lantern was a tall hollow tower made of bricks and tiles. Firewood was added to the fire and it was lit after the moon worship. The moon worship this time was naturally different from the moon worship at home. The scene was very grand and the venue was set in the square in front of Wandanghua. Wandanghua was the main building in the capital that hosted large-scale gatherings. It was 3 stories high and there were a total of 9,999 lanterns inside and outside the building. However, all the lanterns were lit only 2 or 3 times a year. There was still some distance to Wandanghua. Everyone got off the carriage and prepared to walk. Tonight there was no need for servants to carry lanterns to lead the way. The place they were at was already brightly lit. The lanterns came from all directions and the small shadows gathered at their feet. Jingwan was amazed by such a scene. Cheat and Prefecture also celebrated the festival, but it was still not as grand as this. It was only the Mid-Autumn Festival. She wondered how grand the Lantern Festival would be. A few older brothers went out as escorts. Speaking of which, the eldest sister-in-law, little Wang Shi, would only be out of confinement tomorrow. This was extremely fortunate. If the child was born a day earlier, it would be the Mid-Autumn Festival on July 15th. That would be terrible. It would be another kind of ghost child. In fact, when they went out, Jingwan wanted to let her eldest cousin brother and third brother stay at home to accompany her wife. However, the elders did not agree. Jingwan did not know what little Wang Shi was thinking. On the other hand, Sun Yijiao was purely chasing Luo Jingbo out. She was fine at home with a large group of people accompanying her. It did not matter whether she was there or not. However, it was different when her younger brothers and sisters went out. They were not few in number, so how could there not be a few older brothers following them? Moreover, the few people from the Gu family also shamelessly followed them. However, Jingwan ignored them. That Miss Lian still wanted to be Luo Jingbo's concubine. Although Jingwan blocked her path rudely when the girl saw her cousin Luo Jingbo, although she did not say anything, she still looked like she was about to cry. Her expression was gloomy, as if she was looking at a heartless man in the carriage. Luo Jingbo met them 2 or 3 times. They had goosebumps all over their bodies and took a detour when they saw him. The brother and sister pair ignored them, so the other brothers and sisters of the Luo family naturally treated them as invisible people. Luo Jingbo walked beside Jingwan and told her about the various festivals in Beijing. Naturally, he was able to bring out a lot of interesting things. Jingwan was very happy to hear this. Originally, Jingwan was already engaged, so her protector should be a certain someone. It should be known that tonight was a good time to openly date. Unfortunately, the emperor had set up a family banquet. Even if he wanted to come out and compensate Jingwan, it was definitely not now. If Emperor Luqingdi had a stroke and did not let her go, and wanted to hold a small lantern festival in the palace, he would probably come out even earlier. According to a certain someone's character, if he wanted to use those boring things to trap him, it was better to wash up and sleep. It was easier to come out in dreams. Although there were a lot of people because there were guards around the courtyard, the journey was very easy. There would definitely not be a crowded situation. Those commoners would also not come here. After all, this was a place where high officials and nobles parked their cars. If they squeezed in for no reason, they might be accused of having bad intentions. How wronged would that be? If they had nothing to do, they would generally not come here. This was also the first time Jingwan saw the 10,000 Lanterns Tower. At this moment, the lanterns inside and outside the tower were all lit up. It was brightly lit and looked like a big shining treasure. If one looked at it from afar, the effect would probably be even more realistic. At this moment, the incense table had already been set up and all the tributes were also on the table. Several towers had also been built around it. Not only were they hollow, but in order to conform to the meaning of unity, the towers were also left with round holes. It looked very artistic and beautiful. It was much more troublesome than making square holes. Jingwan only knew from her third brother's explanation that if one stood on the central axis of the lanterns and saw the moon hanging over the top of the lanterns, the moon worship would begin. Jingwan stood over to take a look and estimated that there was not much time left. I wonder which madam is in charge of the moon worship this year? It's the wife of the left assistant minister of the Ministry of Revenue. Jingwan listened from the side. She also knew from her third brother that there would be a different person in charge of the moon worship every year. The left assistant minister of the Ministry of Revenue was noble Consort Su's biological brother. The person in charge of the moon worship tonight was her sister-in-law. The left and right assistant ministers of the Ministry of Revenue were not on the same page. However, if the current Minister of Revenue stepped down, this position would most likely fall into the left assistant minister's hands. Prince Rue and the others had always been plotting. Perhaps it would happen in the next 1 or 2 years. Jingwan thought for a moment. It seemed that her father's name was in the Ministry of Revenue. Elder sister, elder sister. Just as Jingwan was a little distracted, Yu Yao rushed up from behind and hugged her. Jingwan pulled her and turned around. Yu Yao, you're here. Just you alone? Other than father and mother, everyone else in the family came out. I didn't want to stay with them, so I directly came here. Yu Yao said. Jingwan glanced at the group of servant girls and matrons who were closely following her. She was not worried that anything would happen to her. Although Yu Yao had spent more time with Jingwan, the age gap between the two of them was quite large. When there were children of the same age, Yu Yao was more likely to play with them. This allowed Yu Yao to get to know her 2 younger cousins. The 2 young ladies quickly chattered together. Not long after, Yuan Qiao and Zhou Yingshuang appeared together. There were also many other people who knew each other. They greeted each other. As time passed, more and more people gathered. Jingwan guessed that this place and this time should be the most crowded place and time tonight. A beautiful middle-aged woman arrived. The moon worship was about to officially begin. The seats in the middle were all empty. The servants and men of each family all retreated. Although the moon worship was entirely voluntary and there were no rules about who should stand where, there were unspoken rules everywhere. Those with lower backgrounds would consciously move back a little, and those girls from commoner families could only stand at the periphery. Jingwan directly led Yu Yao to the front. At this time there was no need to be modest. Jingwan's aunt's younger sister-in-law subconsciously followed Jingwan. However, she was stopped by someone. Miss Gu, that's not a place for you to go. It's okay if you don't know the rules, but don't implicate the Luo family and make others say that they don't know the rules. The girl's eyes immediately turned red. However, she was not as innocent as the other mother and daughter. She did not really cry. However, the shame in her heart made her feel as if her internal organs were on fire. She kept feeling that the people around her were looking at her and pointing at her. This made her feel ashamed and angry. She was so ashamed that she did not dare to raise her head. The 5, 6, and 7 girls of the Luo family glanced at her. They did not even want to go to the front. Naturally, no one cared about this small episode. The entire moon worship process was similar to the one at home. It did not take long. After the moon worship, the crowd dispersed. They played, finished the lanterns, enjoyed the lanterns, and played games. Although they did not really play for the whole night, it was appropriate for them to play in the middle of the night. Yu Yao and the 2 girls of the Luo family who were slightly older than her got along well. They wanted to meet up and play together. Yu Yao had enough people and the Luo family could also spare some people. Therefore, there was no need to worry about their safety. They only needed to arrange a time and place to go home and let them go. Yuan Qiao excitedly pulled Jingwan and Zhou Yingshuang to play with the water lanterns. The river that passed through the city was just beside them. They did not need to go through Taiyuan. There were many river lanterns by the river. There were many styles and most of them were still lotus-shaped. Yuan Qiao bought a lot of them in one go. She said that everyone in the family would have one. Jingwan and Zhou Yingshuang did not know whether to laugh or cry. The river lanterns were wishing lanterns or praying lanterns. If a person wished or prayed for blessings, the gods would not be able to take care of it. If you wanted to release so many by yourself, it would be even more impossible to fulfill your wish. However, this was just for show. She wanted to express her wishes or write something unrealistic. Jingwan originally wanted to wait for her cousin Qiao to spend a lot of time writing something. In the end, she directly took out her pouch and took out a piece of paper that she had already prepared. She placed one in each of the water lanterns. Her movements were very nimble. Alright, this was not an impromptu idea at all. Jingwan only bought 1 lantern. After thinking for a bit, she wrote, "My family is safe and sound. What about this prince?" His words were so close to her ear that it scared Jingwan quite a bit. She turned her head to glare at the culprit who had suddenly appeared. She gritted her teeth and said, "Your Highness, people can scare people to death if they try to scare people." Li Hongyuan curled his lips into a smile. "It's this prince's fault. Next time I'll definitely remind you earlier." The killing power of this bastard's smile was too great. Moreover, his face was so gentle. It was simply too frightening. That's why it was said that this person who looked good really had its benefits. Jingwan thought that she was also a common person. Li Hongyuan also took a lantern and quickly wrote a few words. Jingwan didn't go to look. Because of a certain person's appearance, the surroundings had become a bit strange. For example, Zhou Shuang and Yuan Qiaoqiao had become more restrained. Their smiles had stiffened a lot. At the same time, there were people who were secretly looking over here. Some recognized them, some didn't. In short, Jin Qinhuang, who had restrained his hostility, was very eye-catching. Jingwan inadvertently glanced at her aunt's sister-in-law, Miss Gu, who had been following her like a little tail after coming out. She was staring at a certain person in a daze. That expression was as if she had lost her soul. https://11/11807/6653300. Chapter 219. The scourge didn't have the slightest self-awareness of being a scourge. Other people's gazes would never affect him. Those who had the courage to come up to him were definitely not afraid of death. Thus, there was no need to be polite to this kind of person. Li Hongyuan gave his lotus lantern to Jingwan. I'll play what you wrote. You wrote everything about yourself, right? Jingwan didn't reach out her hand. She just looked at him quietly. Li Hongyuan seemed to understand the meaning in her eyes. He nodded shamelessly. Wan doesn't have this prince in her heart. This prince can only let others know that you have this prince in your heart, and only this prince. Jingwan was extremely speechless. Even if this young lady fell in love with you in the future, you definitely wouldn't be the only one in my heart, let alone now. However, Jingwan had also seen his stubbornness in certain aspects. There was no use in being in a deadlock with him. He would probably only attract more people to watch. She took the lotus lantern from his hand. Why did Prince come out at this time? After asking, Jingwan realized that she had made a stupid mistake. Prince, just pretend this subject didn't ask. A certain person originally wanted to say, does Wan really want to know? His wife was so enthusiastic that he couldn't refuse. Alas, what a pity. How could he take back what he had said? However, Wan's skin was thin. If she really said something that she shouldn't say in public, she should be angry. Let's go play the lantern. Jingwan glanced at her two good friends beside her. This young lady wasn't the kind of person who would abandon her best friends for a man. Li Hongyuan just followed her gaze and glanced. The two girls who were originally a little fascinated by the man suddenly felt their scalps go numb. It was likely that all the hair on their bodies stood up. This man really wouldn't become a good person. If they were charmed by him, they would die without a burial place. One told them to stay, the other told them to scram. Speaking of which, as good sisters, they naturally thought of each other and everything, so they squatted down and quickly scram. Jingwan glanced at the water lantern left behind by her cousin. He was really too disloyal. Why did she have to be that kind of person? So she was indeed a scourge. It was fine if she was a scourge, but she was also a scourge. Jingwan carries two water lanterns to the riverside and steps on the stone stairs to the bottom. The water surface is only 1 finger lower than the stone stairs under her feet. She squats down and puts the water lanterns into the river. In the slight ripples of the river, the water lanterns float away slowly like the water lanterns put by others. The world of lights on the water, the world of lights under the water, and the stars on the water surface. Jingwan looks at them quietly, hoping that her family members are all well. Well, barely including the scourge beside her. Li Hongyuan stood beside Jingwan. She looked at the water lantern while he looked at her. To their left and right, there was no one more than 10 meters away from them. Even further away, there was clearly a crowd of people. For a moment, it was as if the two of them were the only ones left in the world, and the clamor around them seemed to have vanished without a trace. Sure enough, wherever she was, his heart would always be at peace. However, this peace did not last long. He lowered his head so his vision was not wide. But even so, someone broke in. 2 steps away from Jingwan, he squatted down in what he thought was a graceful manner and placed the water lantern on the table. Then he clasped his hands together as if he was praying sincerely. Throughout the whole process, his head was slightly lowered and the back of his neck was exposed. Under the light, she looks very white and weak, which makes people want to break her. Seeing that their master, who was originally in a good mood, is shrouded by hostility in an instant, Eunuch Mu and his guards want to jump into the river to commit suicide. But before that, they just want to kill the biggest culprit first. Are you blind or what? Can't you see that there are so many people and no one dares to go over? Do you think others can't see your intention? A bitch is a bitch. Eunuch Mu cursed in his heart. But what should he do now? He can't really drag her away in front of Miss Luo. But the most annoying thing is, why did they let her go? There are so many people but no one wants to stop her? What if it was an assassin who wanted to assassinate him? What the hell were they doing? What the hell were they doing? Their faces are gloomy and their hearts are irritable. After praying, Miss Gu turned around and looked at Jingwan, revealing a gentle smile. Jingwan wants to roll her eyes. Miss, if you want to look at the person next to you, just look at him. If you want to know him or hook up with him, just go to him. You want to look at him but can't bear to look at him. To be honest, you are really not good looking. Li Hongyuan reached out and pulled Jingwan up. Let's go. He doesn't want to be ruined by irrelevant people now. Jingwan nodded. If it was Yuan Qiao, Zhou Shuang and the others, Jingwan would be happy to leave this man aside. But now she would rather stay with this living king of hell. Miss Gu, who had been completely ignored, was furious and unwilling to give up. She already knew that this man was most likely Luo Jingwan's fiancé. He had a distinguished status, power and money. He was also very good-looking. He was simply her ideal husband. Even if he was someone else's fiancé, even if she could never become his official wife, she still did not want to give up just like that. She gritted her teeth and followed. But as the saying goes, dreams are plentiful but reality is cruel. If we let her die here, even if it was done by Jin Qinhuang's people, it will not be good for our family's reputation. Luo Jingde whispered. Luo Jingbo nodded his head indifferently. However, her entire body was drenched and she was half dead. She couldn't ask the servants to carry her back. That way, not only would her reputation be ruined, the Luo family would also be criticized by others. If that Miss Gu was Jingwan's tail, then her niece Gu Lian'er was Luo Jingbo's tail. Luo Jingbo tilted his head and saw Gu Lian'er's pale face. Her tears were like broken beads, completely uncontrollable. Seeing Luo Jingbo looking over, she seemed to have found her backbone. Biaoge. She pitifully wanted to rub against him. Take your servant girl and send her back. Jin Qinhuang's people did it. If she dies, she will die in vain. Also, you should learn from this. If you think about something you shouldn't think about, you will probably end up the same. Luo Jingbo clearly warned. Gu Lian'er might be a weak person, but she wasn't completely unable to understand human language. Her face was pale and she didn't dare to take a step closer. Luo Jingbo didn't care about her anymore. My younger brothers and sisters have run away. Let's go take a look? Luo Jingde and Luo Jingming nodded. Although they met every year, it was different every year. They were big men. It was enough to have their own manservants by their side. Watching them leave, Gu Lian'er bit her lip and looked at her aunt who was motionless on the stone stairs. She also wanted to ignore her but she couldn't. Was she already dead? She didn't dare to be sure. Xinli was very scared. She glanced at the servant girl who was at a loss. Why don't you go down and see your daughter? Obviously she was also scared to death, but the servant girl had to go. Trembling, she went down and reached out her trembling hand. She found that she was still breathing. It seemed that she had just fainted. She couldn't help but cry with joy. Still alive. Of course she was still alive. Since she said to leave her with one breath, she naturally wouldn't kill her. In any case, she was still a relative of Luo Sangunyang. It wasn't good to kill her. However, this lesson was enough. If there was a next time, there wouldn't be another chance. Gu Lian'er called her own servant girl to help. They helped her up and let the servant girl carry her. Step by step, they walked towards the place where the carriage was parked. Seeing the situation, those who didn't know were surprised. Did she fall into the river? Those who knew sneered. Jin Qinhuang's people held her down in the river, gagged her mouth and broke her hand. Jin Qinhuang took Luo Sangunyang to light the river lanterns. The two girls who were close to Luo Sangunyang all avoided them. She didn't even look at her own virtue. You didn't see her appearance at that time. It was simply too scary. Perhaps she thought that her beauty was unparalleled. Any man would be attracted. It's hard to say. They all say that Jin Qinhuang is walking the road of beauty and bones. That's not a joke. Jin Qinhuang was fond of beauty, but he had always been the one to choose. Those who threw themselves at him all didn't have a good ending. The bystanders looked at each other in dismay. They looked at the unconscious Miss Gu with pity but more disdain. When the crowd had mostly dispersed, Yuan Xiaoqiao and Zhou Yingshuang reappeared by the river. They had seen the situation just now. At this moment they looked at each other and didn't know what to say. After a moment of silence, Yuan Xiaoqiao suddenly laughed. Yingshuang, it's quiet here. Let's hurry and light the lanterns. Otherwise there will be more people. She excitedly went to pick up a few river lanterns and called for the servant girl to help. At the place where Jingwan had placed the river lanterns, the place where Miss Gu had almost lost her life, Yuan Xiaoqiao put down the river lanterns one by one. She seemed to dislike them for moving too slowly and even used her hands to paddle the water. As for the river lantern hawkers who had never seen such a scene before, they were almost scared silly. They could only slow down on their own. As for the people who didn't know the situation, they were puzzled when they saw that there was a lot of space. However, because Yuan Xiaoqiao and Zhou Yingshuang were there, they didn't think much of it. They bought the river lanterns and went down. Jingwan strolled around beside Li Hongyuan. She looked around and felt the rich festive atmosphere. This was something that would never have happened in her previous life. Therefore, after so many years, Jingwan's love for the various festivals had never weakened. Moreover, the capital was very different from Qian Prefecture. The pavilion corridor built by the river had 9 bends and 18 bends. Lanterns of flowers, birds, fish and insects were hung. Of course, there were also very square lanterns. The white paper was also painted with exquisite paintings. There were countless small games. Listening to the waves of cheers and applause, it was a lively and prosperous scene that belonged to this era. Do you want it? Li Hongyuan's voice softly sounded in her ear. Jingwan subconsciously rubbed her ear. She turned her head to look at him, then shifted her gaze to the high platform full of lanterns. The lanterns were obtained after 3 rounds. The final prize was hung in the middle of the platform. It was a colored glass lantern. It didn't have an ordinary appearance. It was a person standing on auspicious clouds and holding a jade rabbit. Although it was only half the height of a person, it was vivid and lifelike. Because of the light inside the lantern, it didn't appear frivolous. Instead, it seemed to have the aura of an immortal. This kind of craftsmanship was amazing. It was no wonder that there were so many people around. However, it seemed that there weren't many people who made it to the second round. Wan, if you want it, I can take it. Jingwan tilted her head. Troublesome, don't get so close to speak. Speaking with a normal tone was already breaking the rules. What was he trying to do by lowering his voice? Take it? How does Prince plan to take it? Forcefully take it? If I forcefully take it and give it to you, won't people criticize you? If they scold Ben Wang, it doesn't matter. It was said that Jin Qin Wang had nothing good in his face. This knowledge was naturally included. However, Jingwan dared to conclude that it wasn't the case. Since he said it out loud, he would definitely be able to use conventional means to get it. If he really did that, the things that he deliberately concealed would be exposed. She shook her head. I just think it's very pretty. I don't want it. Li Hongyuan seemed to have seen through her thoughts. It doesn't matter. So what if something was exposed? I really don't want it, Jingwan said. Her eyes turned and then she suddenly lowered her voice. Could it be that Prince wants me to face a beauty day and night? There was a smile in her eyes and there was a bit of ridicule. Li Hongyuan's face immediately darkened. Jingwan covered her mouth and laughed very happily. To be able to make her laugh so happily, Li Hongyuan's expression eased and he reached out to touch her face. When Jingwan saw this, she immediately took a step back. Tonight, even if a man and woman walked together, there wouldn't be any gossip. But if they were too intimate, it definitely wouldn't do. Prince, let's go. Saying this, she took a few steps back with a smile on her face. Then she turned around and leisurely walked forward. When they walked far away, a person came out from behind the lampstand next to them. It was Sun Yilin. He didn't call his friends and he wasn't with his brothers at home. There was only a manservant by his side. The manservant looked at him with some apprehension. He knew how deep his young master's feelings for Luo San Miss were. That kind of scene just now, for him, was like stabbing a knife into his heart. The smile on his face was getting less and less. Many times, to be silent from morning to night, it was impossible to say that he wasn't worried. Sun Yilin knew that he might meet Jingwan tonight. He also knew that Prince Jin might be with her, but he still came. He didn't go to the 10,000 Lanterns Tower during the moon worship. He wanted to try if he had that fate with her. After all, this neighborhood wasn't small. Even if he deliberately looked for her, he might not be able to find her. Facts proved that this fate still existed. Ignoring the pain from his heart, Sun Yilin turned his gaze to the lamp. After a moment he walked over. Sun Yilin's appearance caused even louder cheers. Everyone had great expectations for him. In fact, Sun Yilin really didn't let them down. When it came to words, he had never lost. Others worked hard but couldn't even pass half of the first level, but he didn't stop to rest and passed 3 levels in a row. He often blurted it out without even thinking. Finally, holding the beauty lantern, he finally revealed his first smile tonight, causing many women in the boudoir to blush and their hearts to beat. In recent months there had been no news of him. When they met again he seemed to be even more attractive. Such a person, they didn't know what kind of woman could be worthy of him. However, Duchess Ding didn't seem to be a good mother-in-law. Sun Yilin left the high platform, gave the beauty lantern to the servant, and walked in the opposite direction from Jingwan. "Young master, will you send this lantern to the Luo family tomorrow?" "Keep it. Whatever my little sister needs, she has her husband." The servant silently shut up. Jingwan stepped onto the stone bridge and looked at the lake not far away. Countless water lanterns passed under the bridge and all of them converged into the lake. It was as if the lake had merged with the stars in the sky. It was too beautiful to behold. "Is this lake formed naturally?" Jingwan asked curiously. "No, it was dug by the great ancestor." Jingwan praised in her heart. Although the great ancestor was from a humble background, he was also very sentimental. The willows by the lake were rustling, the pavilions and the lights were waning. Could be regarded as a dating spot. Don't ask why Jingwan only thought of this instead of drinking water, because there was no shortage of water in the capital. The river was convenient for many people, but this lake was purely superfluous. "Those boats, are they pleasure boats?" There were more than 10 boats on the lake. The worst of them had 2 floors. At this time they were slowly wandering on the lake. They were also brightly lit and magnificent. Li Hongyuan glanced at Jingwan. It seemed that he didn't quite understand Jingwan's meaning. "Yes. Which one is the Huaiqin pleasure boat?" Jingwan was very curious. "Wanwan, why do you ask this? Isn't it because the courtesan of the Huaiqin pleasure boat took a fancy to my 3rd brother? Moreover, I heard that the Huaiqin pleasure boat is yours. The girls inside must be the ones you choose to see the guests." Jingwan looked at him. It seemed that she was purely curious but also seemed to be teasing. Li Hongyuan's expression was a bit unpredictable. Who would tell this kind of thing to the girls in the back house? I not only heard it but also wanted to see it. It was a pity pleasure boats and the like were all forbidden areas for girls. If they dared to try, their spittle could drown you to death. After the wedding, Ben Wang will take you there. With him taking her there, she couldn't go anywhere. Jingwan was surprised. Soon after she smiled. This man was really... "It's almost time. Let's go back." Li Hongyuan nodded his head in agreement. They didn't follow the original path and chose to go on the opposite side of the river. When they returned to the front of Wandenglu, the tile tower had already been completely burned up. It was like a pile of bonfires, but it was far more beautiful than bonfires. The tiles were burning red and there was a kind of beauty like red jade in the fire. It far exceeded their original expectations. Meeting other Wang Ye and Wang Fei didn't seem to be strange. Rui Qinwang invited Jin Qinwang to have a drink, and Li Hongyuan agreed. He turned to Jingwan and said, "Go back early and rest. Your family still has work to do tomorrow." Jingwan nodded. Rather than chatting with Rui Qinwang Fei, Jingwan was more willing to go back to sleep. So without saying anything, she bid farewell to them and left under the escort of her maidservants. "Lao Lu, you're really serious now." Rui Qinwang smiled warmly. Li Hongyuan had always been too lazy to pay attention to this kind of probing. Li Hongming was somewhat sincere to her. She was afraid that Su Guifei had told him everything. The son of a ghost? The country and the throne were all fought for with blood. When Jingwan returned to the carriage, it was almost time for the appointed time. After all, several of her younger brothers and sisters were still young. They couldn't play late, so she sat in the carriage and waited. Sure enough, it didn't take long for them to appear one after another. However, Yi Yao didn't want to go home. Acting spoiled and acting shamelessly, Jingwan was also helpless. She discussed with Yu Yao's wet nurse and sent someone to report to Great Princess Royal's Fu and bring her back to Luo family. Yi Yao was overjoyed. Soon after, she abandoned Jingwan and went to find 2 sisters to play. Throwing them away after using them. Jingwan couldn't help but laugh and scold when she found that 2 people were missing. Where did they go? They already went back. Luo Jingbua said. Went back. Jingwan looked to the side. There was indeed one carriage missing, and the coachman also expressed his affirmation. Since that was the case, there was nothing to say. https://11/11807/6653301. Chapter 220. However, not long after Jingwan and the rest returned to the Luo family, they heard that the Gu family's short-sighted girl was about to die. Jingwan was extremely shocked. She was still fine before. How long had it been and she was about to die? Jingwan didn't doubt it. This was the Luo family. The doctor was the Luo family's official doctor. How could the Gu family feign illness and feign death under her nose? Furthermore, would her own family lie to her about this kind of thing? Therefore it was definitely true. That aunt and niece pair came back early. It was very likely that something happened after she left. Jingwan pondered for a moment. That Miss Gu had just entered the capital. The people outside didn't have any enmity with her, so they wouldn't put her in a sack and beat her up. She also wouldn't have been raped and lost her chastity. Otherwise, when third brother said that she had already returned, he wouldn't have been so indifferent. The most likely thing was that she fell into the river. At this time, catching a cold could cause death. Drowning could cause a lung infection causing a high fever. Jingwan decided to go and take a look. It wasn't that she was concerned about the other party, but purely to know what happened. Just as she walked out of the courtyard, she ran into Luo Jingbua. Apparently their destination was the same. Third brother, you should know what happened, right? Luo Jingbua frowned and hesitated for a moment. In the end, he still told her what happened. Jingwan's footsteps paused. Alright, she really did fall into the water. But it wasn't an accident, it was man-made, and it was under the eyes of everyone. The only people who could do this kind of thing were the living Hell King and his subordinates. If it was other people, the emperor would have done it secretly. In a feudal society under the imperial power, there were no human rights. Jingwan rubbed her slightly swollen temples. Luo Jingbua saw her like this and knew that she was kind-hearted. He was worried that she would be estranged from Jin Qinhuang. Little sister, Jin Qinhuang has already given you face. Otherwise, it could have been a corpse at that time. I know, I'm just worried that he has killed too many people and damaged his virtue. It's not good. The members of the Gu family were a little annoying, but their crimes did not warrant death. Initially, he only wanted to teach that Lady Gu a lesson, not take her life. However, this lesson was a little too harsh. Now that things had turned out like this, the matter was already irreversible. Could Jingwan still have a conflict with Jin Qinhuang because of her? Jingwan was very clear about who was close and who was distant. She was not a saint. Even if Li Hongyuan killed an unrelated person in front of her, she would not blame him. When Jingwan and Madame Gu arrived, other than Luo Rongyan, Madame Zhang and the Gu family, Madame Luo and Madame Wang were also there. Madame Wang was in charge of the household affairs and had to be involved in all matters of the family. Madame Luo, as the person with the highest authority in the inner residence, should also come and take a look. However, at this time they were all very silent. The Fu doctor prescribed medicine, inserted needles and fed the medicine to Lady Gu. Whether she could endure or not, it would depend on her own luck. Madame Gu and Madame Zhang hugged Gu Lianer and kept crying. Jingwan's uncle, his eyes were red and he looked like he was on the verge of exploding in anger. Although he did not say anything, but looking at his appearance, it was likely that he wanted to put this account on the Luo family. Old Madame is not saying anything. Could it be that this matter did not happen? My good sister became like this after going out for a trip. Even the minister's residence is not so overbearing and unreasonable. If you don't give this Gu an explanation, even if I have to sacrifice my life, I will not let this matter rest. What kind of person was Madame Luo? How could she not see that this man's eyes were full of calculation? They came to the capital this time to borrow the Luo family's power, whether it was to seek an official position or to achieve other goals. However, in these few days, Luo Shangshu did not have any intention of paying attention to him at all. It was impossible for him not to be anxious. Now that such a thing had happened, he must be very happy. With such a handle, he would naturally try his best to gain benefits. Madame Luo was calm and collected. Even if you want an explanation, this old one needs to know what happened. If it was your sister who did something, this old one will definitely pursue the matter of you implicating the Luo family. Our Luo family is upright and upright. We will never say no to what we should take responsibility for. However, if it is something that we should not take responsibility for, no one can blackmail us. Only then did Uncle Gu realize that his attitude was too extreme. He only spoke viciously, but if he really went against the Luo family, it would undoubtedly be like striking a rock with an egg and he would end up digging his own grave. Old madam, I was also anxious for a moment. Please forgive me. After all, father and mother handed my sister over to me. Now that things have turned out like this, how can I explain it to them? As he spoke, he actually choked up. Jingwan and her sister looked at each other outside the door. This acting was also very good. It was no wonder that they could raise a girl like Gu Liener who would cry whenever she wanted. Her parents were both outstanding. With the excellent genes of both of them, she was definitely better than her parents. However, they had been back for a long time. Could it be that Gu Liener had not clearly explained what had happened? Madame Luo was indifferent. What kind of situation had she not seen before? How could she be deceived by such a small trick? Since your daughter and the servant girl were shocked and incoherent, and the other children of your family did not know anything, there might be someone among the children of the Luo family who knows. I believe that they would not be like your daughter and the others, who could not take the slightest shock. Call them over now and ask them. Even if they don't know anything, there are so many people at the Lantern Festival. We will definitely find out who is right and who is wrong. She then sent someone to call someone over. Since she had said this, Uncle Gu could not say anything more. He looked at his little sister lying on the bed with an unfathomable expression. Before the mother beside Madame Luo reached the door, the brother and sister outside the door asked the servant girl to open the door curtain and entered one after another. Grandmother, Madame Luo looked over and nodded. You came at the right time. Do you know what happened? The two first paid their respects, then Luo Jingbo recounted what happened. Grandmother, who in the entire capital doesn't know what kind of temper Jin Qinhuang has? She shamelessly rushed forward, purely seeking her own death. If it wasn't for little sister, she would probably have fished up the corpse in the river. Moreover, she clearly knew that he was little sister's fiancé, yet she still acted like this. It's really disgusting. Don't even mention Jin Qinhuang's people, I also want to slap her into the river. Luo Jingbo said as he glanced at the unconscious little sister Gu, his eyes cold. Madame Luo's expression also became cold. Is it all true? Biaomei was also at the side at that time. Even if she couldn't explain it clearly, she wouldn't have been unable to nod or shake her head. Uncle Gu's face was green and white. He had provoked a Wang Ye. Sure enough, even if he died, he would have died in vain. He glared at Gu Liener. Is what your Biaoga said true? What are you crying for? Quickly say it. Gu Liener was startled and cried even more pitifully. She seemed to nod with difficulty. Madame Luo stood up. Then there's nothing to say about this matter. According to seniority, your little sister is Wan's elder. This old one has never seen such a shameless thing in my life. This niece wants to be my grandson's concubine. She really has a family history. Eldest daughter-in-law, arrange for someone to send her to the manor overnight. Tomorrow is your grandson's 1-month birthday. If she dies at home, wouldn't it be bad luck? Whether she lives or dies, it all depends on her luck. Your family move out of the Luo family within 3 days. Otherwise, don't blame this old one for mercilessly sweeping you out of the house. Zhangshe, you better draw a clear line between you and them. Otherwise, take the letter of divorce and get out of the Luo family. Madame Luo finished speaking and directly left. It could be seen that she was really angry. Wangshi and Jingwan's siblings all left with Madame Luo. Zhangshe sat there in a daze, not knowing how to react. Luo Rongyan pulled her. Let's go. What are you still doing here? Zhangshe seemed to have found her backbone and tightly grasped his hand. Husband, we'll talk about it when we get back. He didn't want to stay in this place. He didn't care about this family. Uncle Gu wanted to keep them, but no one paid any attention to him. After Madame Zhang got married, Luo Rongyan was the center of her life. Her children occupied the edges and corners of her life. There was still a thread that connected her maternal family. If she maintained a good relationship with everyone, then naturally there would be peace. However, if someone threatened her marriage, then not to mention her married sister, even her parents, she would cut ties with them. Uncle Gu clenched his fists and glared at the mother and daughter who were still crying. Still crying? Look, this is all your fault. Eating and living in the Luo family's house was naturally much better than before. Luo Shangshu didn't say anything and they didn't want to look for a house outside. However, they had no choice now. After all, if they were really kicked out, it would be too embarrassing. Zhangshi didn't expect things to turn out like this. She only thought that her sister was easy to manipulate. If she could be like a fish in water in the Luo family with that kind of personality, then her mother-in-law must be soft. Who knew that her prediction was completely wrong? How can you blame me? Isn't it all your sister's fault? She's trying to climb up the social ladder. How can she covet a noble? I told you not to take her with us. Now that we've completely offended the Luo family, are you satisfied? Zhangshi was a little flower outside, but not in her own home. Zhangshi's face was livid. Indeed, his daughter was wrong, but more importantly, his sister had completely angered Madame Luo. They heard the most in the Luo family about how much Madame Luo loved her third granddaughter. Therefore, when Zhangshi sent people to take Gu Xiaomei away, their family couldn't stop them. They couldn't wait to help get her away. After Zhangshi heard it, Zhangshi didn't comment. She had seen many such selfish people. When they were useful, they were like blood-sucking bugs. When there was a problem, they would push the blame to others and couldn't wait to kick them to death. Zhangshi didn't have any opinions about Zhangshi. Zhangshi had long known about her. Zhangshi sent Gu Xiaomei away just like that without causing any waves. As for whether she could see her again, it depended on whether she could endure it or not. The next day, Jingwan and the others came out of the main courtyard to pay their respects and went directly to the first branch. Yu Yao, who refused to go home last night, also followed. Speaking of which, she was the most compatible with the legitimate daughter of the fourth branch. She didn't know if it was because this Miss Luo also followed Jingwan like a little tail when she was in Chidan Prefecture and was deeply influenced by Jingwan. Little Zhangshi had finished her confinement and was neat and tidy. She didn't look much plump. After all, when she was pregnant she didn't look good, but she was in good spirits. When she saw Jingwan and the others, she smiled very happily. Jingwan and the others looked at the child. They had seen him when they just came back. It had only been a few days, but they felt that he seemed to have grown a little. Children really grew older. Because he was a little thin and weak when he was born, they took very good care of him. Now he looked white and chubby. His eyes were big and round and especially bright. Jingwan guessed that there shouldn't be any problems with this child. Probably because she was pregnant, Sun Yijiao liked the child very much now. She couldn't wait to take this little baby back and raise him. Little Zhangshi laughed. Sister-in-law, don't be envious. Wait a few more months until the one in your belly comes out. After a long time you will be annoyed. We'll talk about it when the time comes. For now, let me cherish him. They chatted and laughed around the little baby, and guests came one after another. The first guests who came were naturally the members of the Wang family. They were Madame Wang's biological mother, several sisters-in-law, younger sisters-in-law, and 2 younger niece-in-law. This branch of the Wang family was also flourishing. Because he was the eldest grandson of the eldest branch and the first one in the 4th generation, he was naturally very important, so the ceremony was very grand. The officials in the imperial court couldn't come, but their family members also came. For those who were not suitable to visit, such as the princes. As for Luo Jingguo's wedding, because Li Hongyuan took the lead, others followed. This time, Li Hongyuan only sent gifts. Naturally, it was not appropriate for his wife to visit, but he sent a lot of congratulatory gifts. Great Elder Princess also sent someone to send a lot of congratulatory gifts. Yu Yao became the representative of Great Elder Princess's mansion. She ran around the Luo family happily. Those who saw her also had some thoughts in their minds. However, she was just a child. Perhaps it only represented that the 2 families had a nominal relationship, but they didn't have any deeper contact. https://11/11807/6653303. Mobile edition website, M. Chapter 221. As for the Grand Secretary, he didn't show up for most of the time at the temporary imperial residence. Everyone thought that he really couldn't make it. When he returned to the capital, if he didn't hand in a memorial and resign, then Lu Qingdi would directly remove him from his position. Who would have thought that he didn't stay quiet after returning to the capital but gradually began to show up? His spirit was getting better day by day, as if the capital's environment was more suitable for him. It was nourishing. Now he could show off his power in the cabinet again. Lu Qingdi didn't seem to have the intention of firing him. Speaking of which, Wan Ruizhong had always been in the emperor's party and only listened to the emperor's orders. For Luchingdi, he was loyal and capable. There was no one more convenient to use than him. When Juan Ruiz Hong was in the temporary imperial residence, he didn't show up and also cut off contact with Luchingdi. Of course not. From time to time he would write memorials to talk about the past and talk about the relationship between the emperor and his minister. Then he would give appropriate suggestions about the flood. While not forgetting their relationship, he also let Luchingdi know his ability. He also appropriately expressed that he was recuperating now in order to be more loyal to the emperor. Luchingdi was actually very clear about his physical condition. After all, it was the imperial physician who took Juan Ruizhong's pulse. As for those memorials, why didn't the other princes know about it? Luchingdi was not a puppet emperor and naturally had his own channels and means. Otherwise, if he let his sons know everything clearly, he wouldn't be able to survive. After learning about Juan Ruizhong's physical condition, Luchingdi didn't intend to dismiss him. Even if he wanted to deceive himself and tell himself that his sons were harmonious, he knew very well that they were suppressing each other on the surface because of political differences. Not to mention that there must be an undercurrent or even a bloody storm in the place where he couldn't see. In such a situation, changing the Grand Secretary of the Cabinet would definitely be a fierce battle. The person who sat on the throne in the end might not be to his liking. In this case, why bother to change? Anyway, he didn't take the matter of the Ruan family seriously and no one took it seriously. Originally, the source of everything was Ruan Fengfei. She was still a victim and didn't cause any big trouble. Therefore, it was really not that easy to put a label on Juan Ruiz Hong. Luchingdi did not want to replace him, and Juan Ruiz Hong himself was also very cautious. Even if they could not find anything that could be used against him, how could the others take him down? At this time, Prince Rui was probably the only one with a burning mouth. The others might only feel regret in their hearts. The Grand Secretary was still firmly held in Juan Ruizhong's hand, not spitting it out. However, Prince Rui was different. His mother had thoroughly offended Juan Ruiz Hong. He originally thought that this old thing wouldn't be able to climb back up, but who knew? He was the Grand Secretary of the Imperial Cabinet. All the memorials to major events in the world had to go through him. Even though there were still 3 cabinet elders in the Imperial Cabinet, he could still influence many things without batting an eyelid. He didn't need to side with anyone. He only needed to slightly target Prince Rui in certain areas to make him suffer a great loss. No one would even notice that something was wrong. Prince Rui knew this very well, so how could he not be anxious? After Imperial concubine Su learned of this matter, she could only say to miscalculation. Other than that, she couldn't do anything else, let alone say a word in front of Luchingdi. Imperial concubine Su was favored, but she was far from being able to participate in politics. Juan Ruiz Hong knew how he had offended Luo Peishan. Naturally, he would find an opportunity to apologize. However, this kind of thing was naturally not easy to say. However, these old foxes in the officialdom could twist their words 78 times in their stomachs. Things that they already knew, if they were mentioned in a vague way, they would know everything. Then they would have a few meaningful words. Well, they were probably all working for the same person. Well, since your family's matter has been dealt with and you have been kept in the dark for so many years, I will be magnanimous and not bicker with you. During the banquet, Luo Shangshu's great-grandson was carried out for everyone to see. He received a lot of praise. He was so small and didn't know anything yet. He was smart and had the appearance of great talent. In the future he would definitely become a pillar of the country and so on. Everyone knew that this was flattery. Under normal circumstances no one would pay attention to it. But Luo Peishan was in a good mood as a great-grandfather, so he naturally happily accepted it all. When the child was brought back, he brought back a lot of good things. It should be known that he had already received a lot of good things from the female guests before. After this little guy's 1-month birthday banquet, it was time to prepare for Jingwan's coming-of-age ceremony. On the 6th day of September, there were still 10 or 20 days to go. However, the big families would not complain about having too much time to prepare these things. They would only feel that it was not enough. If it were the royal family, it would be more cumbersome, especially when it was related to the dignity of the emperor. For example, the birthday banquet and so on, it would take at least 3 months to prepare in advance. Invitations were sent to many high officials and noble families in the capital. Although there were so many officials in the capital that if a plaque fell down, 2 of the 3 people who were hit by it might be officials, there were not many families who were qualified to be first-grade officials. Those who were below 3rd grade probably could only be relatives. Jingwan's status and her relationship with Great Elder Princess and Prince Jean were obvious. Her coming-of-age ceremony was at least several times more grand than the 1-month birthday banquet of the eldest grandson of the first branch of the Luo family. Because Great Elder Princess was present, the concubines of other princes and princesses would naturally be present, not to mention the madams and old madams of dukes' mansions and marquis mansions. As far as the current Luo family was concerned, perhaps only Luo Paishan's birthday banquet could be compared with this. As expected, when they learned that Jingwan's coming-of-age ceremony was about to be held, many people inquired about the candidate for the position. Although they knew that there might not be anyone who would accept the position in the end, they still couldn't help but think about it. Apart from other things, Great Elder Princess would be the guest of honor. If she praised the candidate, the status of their daughter would immediately rise a lot. Yes, no one had different ideas about the candidate of the guest of honor. The Luo family didn't hang on to this matter. They directly announced to the public that they had found a candidate and had obtained the other party's consent. Therefore, since those who had the idea didn't get the news, it had nothing to do with them. Although they didn't directly say who the candidate was, they still knew it after inquiring about it. After all, it was not a secret. However, this final result made many people feel a little strange. They had a biological sister. Even if she was too young and unsuitable, there was one who was only a year younger than her. Even worse, there were still cousins. In the end, she chose an outsider. What should they say? Of course, as an outsider, they would only grumble in their hearts and wouldn't say anything. But as a relative, they would definitely be unhappy. As a relative, they would support an outsider instead of a relative. They had never seen such a heartless and unscrupulous person. Of course, they wouldn't say such harsh words out loud, but that was what they meant. They even hoped that Jingwan would be replaced. However, these people were all stopped by Madame Luo. With her there, no one dared to act rashly. This matter didn't reach Jingwan's ears. However, even if she knew, Jingwan wouldn't change her expression. She was an emotional and cold-blooded animal. So what? The Zhou family was quite happy. After all, their daughter generally didn't have a chance to show her face in front of Great Elder Princess in her life. Because she was already engaged, they didn't care whether she could be favored by those noble ladies or not. However, Zhou Yingshuang's uncles and even her father felt a little regretful that she was engaged too early. If they had known that today would happen, they should have broken off the engagement with the Chancellor of the Imperial College now. When Zhou Yingshuang learned about it, she burst into tears. At that time, when she was blind, the other party still agreed to this marriage. Now she just wanted to show her face and they wanted to break off the engagement? Did she think she was noble just because she showed her face? She was so snobbish and heartless. How could she still want to find another man? She might as well not get married and be a sister-in-law for the rest of her life. Zhou Yingshuang was so angry that she almost didn't want to be the assistant. Fortunately, her mother stopped her. If you really did that, wouldn't you be wasting Miss Luo's and Miss Yuan's good intentions? Don't bother with them, your grandmother is still above. If they dare to say such things, your grandmother will fly and break their legs. Time went by in a busy way. Soon it was the 3rd day of September. After writing their resignation on a piece of paper, Luo Rongyan and Madame Zhang went to Great Elder Princess's mansion in person. They first greeted her verbally and then submitted their resignation. 2 days later, the couple went to Great Elder Princess's mansion again. Great Elder Princess gave them a reply. On the 6th day of September, the Luo family opened the door to welcome the guests. Although most of the guests were female, they were all noble, so Madame Luo had to cheer up to welcome them. When Li Hongyuan came in person, it seemed that there was nothing strange. As for the other brothers, it was even less strange. However, these noble masters found that there seemed to be servants of the Luo family serving them. Others didn't feel anything, but Prince Rui felt a little guilty. After all, he had once seduced a girl in the Luo family. Now there was no suitable girl for him to seduce, but he was guarded against as if he was a thief. Li Hongyuan glanced at him. He was the one who added fuel to the fire about Luo Jingying. Today was his sweetheart's big day. If anyone dared to make trouble, he would be the first to kill him. As the star of today's ceremony, Jingwan was preparing for the East Room. At this time she had finished bathing, changed her clothes and sat down to wait. Beside her there were not only the host and assistant, but also the people who were close to her. Seeing that it was almost time, Great Elder Princess left. Outside, as the host Luo Rongyan and Madame Zhang stood on the steps to the east and waited. 3 assistants selected from their relatives stood on the west with trays. At this moment the music sounded. The graceful and noble great elder princess walked in unhurriedly from the outside. Luo Rongyan and Madame Zhang hurried to greet her. They bowed to each other and respectfully asked great elder princess to sit in the host's seat. Then many guests also sat in the audience seats. In the end, Luo Rongyan and Madame Zhang sat in the host's seat. When everything was ready, Luo Rongyan stood up and made a simple speech, announcing the official start of Jingwan's adulthood ceremony. Zhou Shuang came out first. She washed her hands and stood beside several assistants. Then Jingwan, dressed in a white robe, walked out unhurriedly. The white robe was a boy's robe. The style was simple and the color was monochromatic. Even so, it couldn't cover up Jingwan's style. Some people said that the simpler the clothes, the better the temperament and self-restraint of a person. Undoubtedly, this was the case on Jingwan. Chapter 222. It was said that the simpler the clothes, the more it reflected a person's temperament and self-restraint. Jingwan was undoubtedly so. Jingwan had 2 completely different experiences and cultural accumulations of 2 completely different lives. Because of her previous life, she had foresight and a magnanimity that ordinary girls could not match. Also because of the hardships and tribulations in her previous life, she was tenacious and unyielding. In this life, her ancient upbringing and the warmth of her family made her more reserved and gentle. All these things were mixed in her, but they did not contradict each other. She was like the highest quality jade that had been carefully carved and polished, blooming with a brilliant radiance. Jingwan stood in the center of the field with a calm face. She faced the south and bowed to the many guests who were watching the ceremony. She turned to the west and knelt on the mat that had been placed in advance. Zhou Shuang came forward to comb her hair and then put the comb on Jingwan's left side. Perhaps it was because there were too many people and guests, but Zhou Shuang seemed to be a little nervous. Jingwan felt that her hands were trembling a little, but fortunately she was able to control herself. If she made a fool of herself, even if no one said anything, she would blame herself and be too ashamed to show her face. Jingwan got up, turned around and knelt on the ground facing the east. She naturally put her hands on her thighs, with her elbows facing out and her fingertips facing in. Great Elder Princess got up, followed by Luo Rongyan and Madame Zhang. Great Elder Princess washed her hands and dried them on the steps. Then they returned to their seats and sat down peacefully. Then the ceremony began. One of the secretaries came forward with a tray. On the tray, there was a plain dress with a matching handkerchief and hairpin. At the same time, Great Elder Princess walked to Jingwan, opened and closed her mouth, and recited a congratulatory speech. On an auspicious day in this month, I'll add a dress. Give up your youthful aspirations and follow your lead. May you live a long and prosperous life. Then she leaned slightly and combed Jingwan's hair. Because of her status, Great Elder Princess did not kneel down to add to Jingwan's hairpin ceremony. When Great Elder Princess took the hairpin, she paused slightly, which was rare for her. When a noble girl of high status reached the marriageable age, the concubines in the palace would usually give her a lot of things. The hairpin and hairpin were basically given by the Empress, and Jingwan was no exception. However, Great Elder Princess knew that the gifts given by the Empress were not good. After all, her daughter also received a gift at the marriageable age. When she took the hairpin, she concluded that it was not given by the Empress. There was no reason for her daughter to be worse than Jingwan's. The Luo family was not frivolous, neither was her adopted daughter. No one would think that the Empress's gifts were not good and dared to switch the gifts given by the Empress. Great Elder Princess acted as if she hadn't noticed anything, but her goddaughter probably didn't know anything. After that, she turned around and returned to her original spot. Zhou Shuang stepped forward and straightened Jingwan's hairpin symbolically. Jingwan stood up, bowed to Great Elder Princess and then turned back to the east room. Zhou Shuang took the tray from the minister and followed Jingwan to the east room. There were only Nanny Gong and Jingwan's 2 maids here, so there were no outsiders. Jingwan shook Zhou Shuang's hand with a smile. Her palm was indeed a little sweaty. She opened her mouth slightly and said, "Well done." Zhou Shuang breathed a sigh of relief and smiled. Several people helped her to change into a plain dress. The pure and beautiful dress symbolized the innocence of a girl. When it was taken off, it seemed to fade away. The dress was similar to an undergarment. There were no decorations on the edge of the dress, and the belt was also made of cloth. However, whether it was a plain dress or a plain dress, it looked very simple and it was only worn during the ceremony. No matter the material or the workmanship, it was the best. Jingwan came out in a plain dress, half opened her arms and showed it to the guests. After a while, Jingwan knelt down in front of Luo Rongyan and Madame Zhang, and bowed to them to thank them for raising her. However, Jingwan's bow made them feel ashamed. Madame Zhang couldn't stop crying. When she found it, she hurriedly wiped it away. Those who didn't know would only think that she was crying for joy because her child had grown up. Looking at Jingwan's peaceful face, Luo Rongyan couldn't guess what kind of mood she was in now. A few days ago, Madame Luo almost deprived them of the qualification to be the host of Jingwan's adulthood ceremony. They knelt down and begged for it. Both parents were present. If they didn't attend as hosts, what would others think? There would be a lot of speculations and rumors. Not only would the Luo family's reputation be damaged, but also Jingwan would be implicated. Madame Luo's harsh words made them feel ashamed and once again made them deeply realize how much of a failure they were as parents. When they thought of how many times their children had been disappointed behind their backs, their hearts ached to the extreme. But now was not the time to think too much. They hurriedly asked her to get up. Jingwan knelt down on the mat again to the east, and the second ceremony was carried out. Great Elder Princess did the same thing as before. Two servants came forward with a dress, a plain dress and a hairpin. Great Elder Princess stood in front of Jingwan and recited a congratulatory speech. On the auspicious moon you will wear it. I respect you for your majesty and prudence. May live for 10,000 years and enjoy whose blessings forever. After Zhou Shuang took off the hairpin on her head, Great Elder Princess took out an exquisite and expensive hairpin and Jingwan's hairpin and put it back on her head. Zhou Shuang adjusted Jingwan's hairpin. After Jingwan stood up and bowed to Great Elder Princess again, she took over Chuju's deep robe from Yusi and entered the east room with Jingwan to change her clothes. The light and elegant long skirt symbolized the innocence of a young girl, while the Chuju deep gown showed the bright beauty of a young girl in her prime. After they came out, they also showed off their clothes to everyone. Then they faced the guests and knelt down. This was the second kowtow to show their respect to their teachers and seniors. No matter from which point of view, Great Elder Princess accepted her bow and stood up with a smile. Then the third edition was carried out. There were 3 officers carrying large sleeves, long dresses, ceremonial robes and hairpins. Great Elder Princess stood in front of Jingwan and recited the greeting 3 times. In the name of the year, in the name of the month, in the name of the salty jars. Since the brothers are here, they have become Jud. Since the yellow river is boundless, you shall be blessed by heaven. Zhou Shuang took off the previous hairpin. Great Elder Princess and Jingwan put on the hairpins. After 3 editions, she changed her clothes 3 times, which showed the gorgeous process of Jingwan's transformation. Jingwan, who stood in front of everyone, was wearing a long dress with large sleeves, long dresses and ceremonial robes. She looked graceful and elegant. It seemed that no one was more suitable for this dress than her. Many of the guests were whispering. No matter in their expressions or words, they were all full of admiration for Jingwan. Then they looked at Prince Jin as if they were thinking about something. It seemed that it was a pity to marry such a living king of hell. Li Hongyuan looked at Jingwan with a deep look. No matter how many people were around now, he only had eyes for her. It was not that he had never seen Jingwan dressed up, but it seemed that no one had ever seen her so seductive. Every word and action of hers seemed to hit his heart directly, which was itchy, numb, and a little indescribable pain. Perhaps it was because it meant that she was an adult. To put it bluntly, Li Hongyuan was a vicious wolf who had been waiting by the side for a long time. He always wanted to take Jingwan back to his nest. Now he had all the land, people, and he only needed the right time. He had waited for so many years, and in the process he was also impatient. There were only a few months left, but his impatience seemed to have reached an unprecedented peak at this moment. Li Hongyuan withdrew his gaze from Jingwan and lowered his head, trying his best to suppress the impulse to take Jingwan away under everyone's watchful eyes. Obsessions, demonic barriers, once obtained, they could probably be eliminated. Li Hongyuan felt that this kind of thing probably would not happen to him. Once he got close to her, he wanted to get closer to her by another zhang. In the past he could scheme for her to be engaged to someone else and even worked in the dark. Now he wanted to flay the skin and pull out the tendons of anyone who dared to think of Jingwan. Prince Rui also withdrew his gaze from Jingwan. He did not know how many times he lamented that it was a pity in his heart. He inadvertently glanced at Li Hongyuan sitting next to him. "Sixth brother, what's wrong? Are you feeling unwell?" Prince Rui's words seemed to have pulled him out of a bad situation, and he suddenly turned his head. At that moment, Prince Rui only felt that he was being stared at by the most ferocious beast. It was malicious and ruthless, with its bloody mouth wide open as if it could pounce and tear you to pieces at any time. His heart rapidly contracted and his body tilted to one side, almost flipping over his seat. Prince Rui's expression was abnormally ugly. Although he did not flip over his seat, it was already very rude and humiliating. His status was noble and he was sitting in the first row. Many people saw it. At that time he did not even dare to look at the other people's expressions. He tried his best to maintain his composure. Fortunately, this was not difficult for him. He did not want to look at Li Hongyuan again. In fact, he did not dare to admit his fear. What else could he do if he did not admit it? In fact, Li Hongming instinctively wanted to run away. It was not that he had great willpower to restrain himself, but it was purely because his legs were weak and he could not stand up. From the time he was born until now he had never been so embarrassed. Even if others did not know, he was very angry in his heart. His attitude towards Li Hongyuan had already changed, but at this moment he hated him even more than before. Li Hongyuan glanced at his legs. They were actually trembling in fear. Say that was all he could do. Li Hongyuan smiled for no reason, but it looked very evil. Anyone who saw it would feel their scalp tingle. This living king of hell could really make people's hearts tremble in fear. Jingwan pursed her lips. Her heart was also a little irregular right now. This man was simply like that poppy. You knew it was fatal, but you would still be bewitched by him. Especially when he deliberately seduced you. How many people could resist? And if one really got addicted to it, it would probably be really hard to quit. Jingwan did not know that to Li Hongyuan she was the heart-linking voodoo. Only when she was safe would he be safe. He never wanted to abandon her. He only wanted to place her at the top of his heart and protect her in the palm of his hand. However, he did not want to lock her up so that no one could see her or think about her. As long as she was within his reach, he was willing to give her everything she wanted. He wouldn't imprison her, but he would destroy everyone who coveted her. Disregarding everything else, just this person beside him, his so-called third brother. Li Hongyuan used to be on the same level as his third imperial brother and had the same thoughts as him. A woman who only had looks, no matter how beautiful she was just a plaything. Even if he cared for her a little deep down, he thought that she was not presentable and would only embarrass him if he brought her out. As for Jingwan, she had a good family background and was the best of the best. She was the person who could give them face the most. Naturally, she was the one they wanted the most. Now this person was his eyeball, his heart, and his flesh. He couldn't tolerate having thoughts that he shouldn't have because he admired her. If he had evil thoughts because of selfish interests instead of her own heart, he deserved to die. Li Hongyuan's smile became more and more bewitching. Jingwan withdrew her gaze and thought, this scourge. The three officials removed the furnishings for the coming-of-age ceremony and set up a wine banquet on the west steps. Great Elder Princess motioned Jingwan to take a seat. Jingwan stood on the west side of the table facing the south. When Zhou Shuang served the wine, Jingwan turned to face the north. Great Elder Princess took the wine from Zhou Shuang's hand, walked to Jingwan, and then recited a toast. The sweet wine is thick and I recommend it to your fragrance. Worship the place where you are sacrificed to determine your good fortune. Don't forget the birthday examination in the sky-bearing empire. Jingwan bowed to Great Elder Princess and took the wine. Great Elder Princess saluted back. Then Jingwan sat down on her knees and sprinkled some wine on the ground as a libation. She held the wine cup with both hands and touched her lips symbolically. Even so, she still tasted something. It was sweet, a bit like ordinary sweet wine. However, the Luo family was rich, so the material used to make the wine was certainly not ordinary rice. Jingwan put the wine cup on the table. Zhou Shuang served a small bowl of crystal-clear rice. Jingwan took a small bite, put it down and saluted to Great Elder Princess. After Great Elder Princess saluted back, Jingwan got up and left the banquet. Jingwan walked to Luo Rongyan and Madame Zhang, knelt down and listened to their teachings. Luo Rongyan had mixed feelings. He had prepared a speech, but at this time he couldn't say a word. After a while, Luo Rongyan said, "I hope you live a peaceful and prosperous life." Madame Zhang sobbed softly and didn't say a word. This kind of situation was not unheard of, so it would not be criticized by others. But was Luo Rongyan's teaching? In the eyes of others, it was his love for his daughter. Jingwan also had mixed feelings. They were not qualified parents, but they were not bad parents. At least the father now was much better than the father in the previous life. She didn't know whether it was because he was too disappointed in the previous life, so he didn't have extravagant hopes. Or he had expectations when he was young, but he decisively gave up when he found that they were not qualified parents. He couldn't remember. In fact, Jingwan was very clear that today's result was not caused by her parents alone. She didn't manage it well was also one of the factors. In the end, the influence of the previous life was too deep. Because she and her grandmother depended on each other, she taught her too many things. In this life, when she faced her grandmother who was similar to her grandmother, she subconsciously got close to her and was willing to build a good relationship with her. Her father, on the other hand, had one wife and many concubines, which ruined her impression of him. Perhaps she even secretly hated him. If she had treated them with the same attitude as her grandmother, unless these two people didn't like her from the bottom of their hearts, they wouldn't be like this today. Even so, Jingwan didn't regret it. She had another life's memory. Weren't those children who were born white paper because of their parents' sacrifice? So she wasn't wrong at all, right? Yes, it was like this. This feeling of completely blaming someone else for his mistakes was quite satisfying. Jingwan smiled gently at them. It was good to maintain this situation. Although Luo Rongyan's teachings were not quite the same, Jingwan still followed the script. Although this son is not smart, I dare not only accept it. Then she bowed to them. Jingwan stood up and walked to the center of the hall. She bowed to the main guests, the musicians, and the performers. Everyone nodded in return. Luo Rongyan and Madame Zhang stood up and walked to Jingwan's side. My daughter's hairpin ceremony is now complete. This one thanks everyone for their hospitality. The three of them bowed to the audience again. The entire agenda was finished. The other masters of the Luo family came out to greet the guests. The male guests were led to the front courtyard, and the female guests were led to the back courtyard. It was still early to leave the banquet, so now was the time to chat and build relationships. For the princes who needed a lot of help, they especially couldn't let go of this opportunity. Not only did they have to rope them in, but they also had to prevent others from expressing their goodwill. It was really exhausting. Jingwan held Sunny Jia's hand. Sister-in-law, you've worked hard. Are you tired? I'm fine. Sun Yijia volunteered to be a musician. She was already 5 months pregnant. Originally, the family didn't agree, but Sun Yijia felt that she was in good condition. Except for a little morning sickness in the first 3 months, she had been very good. If it wasn't for this belly, no one would think that she was pregnant. The hairpin ceremony wouldn't take long, so there shouldn't be any problems. In the end, they consulted the food doctor who said that there wouldn't be any problems, so everyone agreed. Speaking of which, in the Luo family, there was probably no one who was better at playing the zither than Sun Yijia. Sun Yijia also valued this child, so no one suspected that she was trying to be brave. They went to the begonia house together. Since the hairpin ceremony was over, Jingwan couldn't keep wearing this dress, especially on her head. It wouldn't make sense if she only wore a hairpin. Even if today was her big day, she wouldn't wear this dress on a normal day. At this time, Zhou Yingshuang no longer had any qualms about telling everyone that she was nervous and worried that she would make a mistake. Yuan Qiao listened and patted her chest. Thank goodness you went. If it were me, I would have been embarrassed. Jingwan laughed. It's not as exaggerated as you make it sound. Why not? You and Yijia might not feel anything, but I used to feel the same way as Yingshuang. Yuan Qiao retorted. Jingwan and Sun Yijia looked at each other. Seemed to be true. Jingwan was trained by her scumbag father since she was a child, and Sun Yijia grew up in the palace. She had been hugged by the emperor and acted coquettishly with him. She was also very familiar with the other nobles, so why would she be nervous? Sister Wan is going to be the princess consort in the future. If you spend more time with her, you won't be nervous when you meet other people. Sun Yijia smiled. How is that the same? It's two different things, okay? It's not a big deal. You'll be fine after experiencing this a few more times. There will be plenty of opportunities in the future. Jingwan patted their arms. Zhou Shuang and Yuan Xiaoqiao might not know each other well, but Sun Yijia knew very well that Jingwan wanted to help them, or rather protect them. Women of their birth were not of high or low status. If they had the support of a princess consort, they would have a much better life in their in-laws' family after they got married. Even if they did not have any children, their in-laws would not dare to make things difficult for them. Moreover, if their husbands wanted to favor their concubines and neglect their wives, they would have to think twice. Jingwan especially hated this kind of thing. Sister Wan was indeed a person who drew a clear line between love and hate. Although it was not to the extent that love makes one live, hate makes one die, she was not stingy when it came to her ability. Nanny Gong and the others had already prepared the clothes for Jingwan after the hairpin ceremony. She didn't need to choose at this moment. She quickly changed her clothes and dressed up. Sun Yijia was inadvertently attracted by the hairpin taken from Jingwan's hair. She instantly thought of the same question as Great Elder Princess. Where are the hairpin and hairpin? Third young madam, here they are. Qing Zhu brought a tray over. Sun Yijia reached out and took a look. Sure enough, they were there. What's wrong? Is there anything special about these things? Yuan Xiaoqiao leaned forward and asked. Nothing. They just look very unique. Sun Yijia smiled faintly. It was so disrespectful to switch the things rewarded by the Empress. Even if she knew it, it was better to pretend that she didn't know. Even if it was exposed in the end, the culprit would take the blame. It had nothing to do with the Luo family. According to Sun Yijia's understanding of that aunt of hers, her tolerance towards Jin Qinhuang was out of the ordinary. She was even able to give up her dignity as the Empress. It was probably because she was able to endure to this extent that Jin Qinhuang did not find trouble with her. After all, she was still the Empress. Such a compromise was too much and was indeed not easy to handle. Many times Sun Yijia admired her aunt very much. However, she was the noblest woman in the world, but she was tolerant of the nominal son of a concubine. Even if it was an expedient measure to protect herself by retreating in order to advance, she was not only aggrieved but also made others think that she was a coward and easy to bully. Of course, other people in the harem couldn't bully her. She was the only one who compromised. Moreover, she had only confronted Prince Jin a few times. Few people knew about it. But so what? After Jingwan dressed up, Sun Yijia felt ashamed of her own inferiority. How could such a tender cabbage be eaten by a pig outside? Leaving the begonia house, Jingwan, as today's main character, naturally had to entertain the guests. Just now, old Madame Luo had already sent someone to inform them to go directly to Shiyuan. Everyone went there to watch the opera. At the entrance of Shiyuan, Jingwan saw the listless Gu Xiaomei. Jingwan's first reaction was, oh, her life was quite tough. She didn't die. At that time, the doctor said that she might not make it. In the end, she was thrown to the country estate. No one took care of her, but she stubbornly survived. As long as she was still alive, Jingwan didn't find it strange that she would appear here. Her uncle and aunt were quite sensible. They moved out on their own. As long as they didn't fall out with each other, it was natural for them to visit her when she became of age. When Gu Xiaomei saw Jingwan, her eyes were filled with bone-deep hatred. However, she quickly withdrew her gaze and even greeted Jingwan properly. She lowered her head and stood to the side. It was obvious that she wanted Jingwan to go in first. Logically speaking, Gu Xiaomei was an elder. Jingwan wasn't married. Even if she was a daughter of an official, she didn't have a rank. When one didn't care about status, one naturally had to consider seniority. Did she really not know the rules, or was she doing it on purpose? Even Sun Yijia's eyes were sharp when she looked at her. Jingwan felt very speechless. You were the one who wanted to get close to that man. You were taught a lesson by him. Now you hate me. Isn't this role reversed? Shouldn't you be the one who should be angry? Why is Wan standing at the entrance? Greetings, Your Highness. The group of people hurriedly greeted him. No need for formalities. Who is this? Li Hongyuan's gaze fell on Gu Xiaomei. It was obvious that these people had stopped at the entrance because of her. Where did she come from? Jingwan was surprised. Your Highness, you don't know her? Li Hongyuan raised his eyebrows. Should this prince know her? Jingwan thought for a moment. This prince didn't see her face clearly at that time. Or maybe he just met her once and couldn't remember her at all. Both seemed to be reasonable. Jingwan glanced at Gu Xiaomei and saw her body tremble. Speaking of which, the person she wanted to pursue, the person who almost killed her, didn't have any impression of her. This was a big blow. Let's go in. Li Hongyuan stepped into the west garden first. Jingwan followed him in a step behind. Sun Yijiao and the other two deliberately slowed down a few steps. Regarding Gu Xiaomei's glorious deeds, Sun Yijiao didn't see it with her own eyes, but she heard her husband talk about it. The other two were even more eyewitnesses. They were all daughters. When they were at home, they saw many of their fathers disgusting Yinyang. Therefore they deeply detested people like Gu Xiaomei. In Shuang, you say, why are there so many wretched people in this world? If it's a man who flirts with flowers and grass, it's fine. But there are also girls who shamelessly throw themselves at him, encouraging those men's arrogance. They become more and more unscrupulous. Simply, Zhou Shuang covered her mouth. It's getting more and more outrageous, spouting nonsense. Who doesn't know that Jin Qinwang is now wholeheartedly focused on Jingwan? Moreover, he has always been uninterested in people who throw themselves at him. Yuan Qiao pulled her hand away and smiled. You're right, the title of living king of hell is not for nothing. Luckily he escaped once, but he's still not tactful. If he wants to throw himself at him again, he probably needs to tell his family in advance and remember to collect the corpse at the mass grave. What's the use of telling his family? Jin Qinwang likes to be implicated. Alright, don't say these unlucky words. Let's hurry and go in. Sun Yijiao urged. Only then did the two people remember that they shouldn't say such dirty things to a pregnant person's ears. They smiled apologetically and held Sun Yijiao's arms, one on the left and one on the right, as they walked into the west garden. From afar they could hear the sound of singing. Bypassing a bush of flowers and trees, they saw the stage. Our Jin Qinwang was still talking with Jingwan and didn't have the slightest intention of going to the male guest seats to sit and watch the play. Therefore, a certain person's purpose for coming here was obviously an ulterior motive. Fortunately, although the two people were close, Jin Qinwang still had a bit of a gentleman's demeanor. Probably because a certain person's reputation was really too bad. Even if they were close, Jingwan was also coerced and was a victim. In the current situation where women had always been strict, unexpectedly, no one accused Jingwan of anything. When they saw it, they also turned a blind eye. Jingwan gradually became aware of this point. She faintly looked at Li Hongyuan. Wang Yi is doing this on purpose, right? Li Hongyuan looked at Jingwan rather puzzledly. What? Pretend? You can continue to pretend with all your might. Nothing. Li Hongyuan chuckled. He had subtly stepped on his father's bottom line step by step, so that his father absolutely indulged him now. He could also subtly step on everyone's cognition. Of course, he didn't intend to do anything in front of others. When he stood with her, he only needed to prevent her from being criticized. It was so simple, so he didn't need to spend more than 10 years like the former, and it seemed that he was about to achieve it now. When they were in the courtyard of the summer palace, Sun Yijia had seen how lovey-dovey the two of them were. At this moment she secretly rolled her eyes and pulled Yuan Qiao, who didn't know what happened, away with Zhou Shuang. Great elder princess took a book and ordered a play which had already finished. Then a princess of the same generation ordered a play and also finished it. They were modest to each other. Madame Sun of Ding General Manor also ordered a play and also finished it. Then these old things didn't take advantage of their seniority and let the juniors order what they liked. But speaking of it, Madame Luo, where did you hire this troupe? They are really good at singing. Yes, I don't know anyone in this troupe. Since they are so good at singing, how can they not be famous at all? They were sent here by Prince Jin's order. I think they should be the troupe raised by Prince Jin himself. Madame Luo didn't evade and said bluntly. Everyone fell silent. They originally wanted to invite the troupe back to their own families to perform next time. Well, they were raised by the King of Hell again. Don't think about anything else. They glanced at the leading actress on the stage. She had a slim figure, a gentle voice, and a beautiful face. There seemed to be several of them. In many people's eyes, an actress was similar to a prostitute, a lowly thing that couldn't be seen in public. There were also a bunch of foxes raised by so many people. Prince Jin specially sent them here today. Did he value third Miss Luo, or did he specially send them here to slap her in the face? This old Madame Luo was really able to keep her composure. If it was someone else, if the young lady that was held in the palm of their hands was treated like this, they would have long exploded in anger. However, the other party was Jin Qinwang, a living king of hell. There was no need to say anything. Even if she said anything, it would also be a waste of time. From the beginning, Madame Luo knew that with such a prospective grandson-in-law, the Luo family would definitely be hated. Whether it was sympathy or gloating, she knew clearly in her heart whether it was sweet or bitter. As for whether he would prove to the world how he treated Wan, Madame Luo didn't want to say anything now. She just waited and saw. Great elder princess, who didn't know the inside story, felt unbalanced. Why was her adopted daughter bullied by that evil creature? Where is Jingwan? Why haven't I seen her for so long? When she said this, she was clearly looking at the two figures who were only one step away from each other. Others didn't dare to go up, but Nanny Gong didn't have that concern. Miss Great Elder Princess is looking for you. Jingwan subconsciously looked back and looked at the main seat of the female guests. Her foster mother was looking at her. She was a little far away, so she couldn't see clearly. However, Jingwan felt that her foster mother seemed to be angry. She felt a little guilty and short of breath, inexplicably, as if she only cared about her love and left all the elders, relatives and guests aside. Your Highness, I'll leave first. Without waiting for him to respond, Jingwan squatted down and quickly left. Li Hongyuan watched Jingwan's figure disappear for a moment and soon appeared on the second floor of the balcony. She first greeted the noblewomen, and then held Great Elder Princess's arm and acted coquettishly with a smile on her face. Li Hongyuan didn't know what Great Elder Princess said to her. Li Hongyuan crossed his arms in front of his chest and leaned against the rockery. His legs were crossed and his whole body looked very lazy. On the stage there were plays one after another, and there was even a martial arts play. Li Hongyuan was absent-minded and hadn't seen Jingwan for a long time. He heard voices coming from the direction of the courtyard gate. It was the men who had finished their relationship and came to watch the play to kill time. Li Hongyuan stood up straight and went straight to the female guest seats. Seeing Li Hongyuan come upstairs, the maid hurriedly reported to Madame Luo. As the master and an old lady, Madame Luo didn't need to care about trivial things. So Madame Luo had been sitting on the side with Li Hongyuan all the time. She didn't sit relatively at the back according to her status, but in the first row with Great Elder Princess. Therefore, Great Elder Princess naturally heard the maid's words. Great Elder Princess just wanted to pull him over and give him a good scolding. Li Hongyuan was clever and came to the door himself. He turned a deaf ear to the greetings that came one after another along the way, and those elders did not take the initiative to greet him either. However, she didn't argue with him. If she really let him take the initiative, she would be worried that her life would be shortened. He didn't care about others, but he still had to give face to his aunt. However, before he spoke, Great Elder Princess scolded him. Don't you know how to avoid arousing suspicion? Great Elder Princess had a good relationship with Lu Qingdi, so she would scold these nephews and nephews. When she scolded them, they could only listen obediently. Li Hongyuan didn't feel much pain and was not much different from his father. Li Hongyuan sat down next to her. I didn't do anything shameful. I just said a few words. Why should I avoid arousing suspicion? Jingwan is my fiancé. She is coming of age today, and tomorrow we can ask the Ministry of Rites to prepare for the marriage. Master Liaochen said that we are a match made in heaven. Is there anything wrong with this marriage that makes me avoid her other fiancé? There was a hint of coldness in his words. What nonsense are you talking about? Shut up. Great Elder Princess snapped. For the sake of this vile creature's marriage, her imperial brother was worried to death. If something really went wrong, even if she, as his younger sister, said something she shouldn't say, she was afraid that he would take his anger out on her. In this case, Jingwan is destined to be mine. Then what's wrong with talking to her before the marriage to get familiar with her? I don't want to meet someone I know nothing about when I get married. Even if I, Li Hongyuan, want to do something disgraceful, I will do it openly. Jingwan immediately spat at him in her heart. Bastard, don't you have done a lot of things secretly? To be able to say such words without blushing or panting, his face was truly unparalleled in the world. Jingwan silently lowered her head and pretended to be shy. However, many people around him nodded in agreement. It seemed that this bastard had a lot of credibility. Am I talking about this? There are so many female guests here. There are so many unmarried girls. You're a man. Imperial aunt, Li Hongyuan interrupted her. In all honesty, I didn't even look at them. On the contrary, I don't know how many of them looked at me. If there's anyone avoiding me, it should be them avoiding Ben Wang. Great Elder Princess was at a loss for words. Get out of here. Go to the male guest area or get out of the garden. She was a relative and wouldn't be too ruthless. What is she doing? Which one of them should be responsible? Madame Luo didn't even raise her eyebrows. Chapter 223. What is she making a fuss about? Which one of the brothers is responsible? Madame Luo's eyebrows didn't even twitch. Jingwan held Madame Luo's arm. Grandmother, who do you think second aunt wants to be responsible? Madame Luo sneered and didn't answer Jingwan's question. Obviously she knew what was going on. Compared to Luo Jingming, Luo Jingbo was the son of the first wife and pioneered a new way of painting. Now meticulous brushwork was slowly becoming more popular and more popular. It was almost certain that he would become a master of his generation. Although he married a wife, her face was disfigured and her dowry was very generous. The latter was the son of a concubine and his father was bedridden. He was currently studying in the Imperial College and had the title of a scholar. In comparison, his advantage should be that he was single. There was a saying, "It's better to be a poor woman than an emperor's concubine." However, in reality, how many women had such willpower and feelings? Luo Jingbo and Luo Jingming were far from the difference between an emperor and a commoner. The biggest difference between them was nothing more than fame, future, and wealth. However, these were already enough. Many people pursued these for their entire lives. There were still people who believed that Luo Jingbo wouldn't like Sunny Jia. Most people believed that a girl's face was everything. If her face was disfigured, her everything would be ruined. At the same time, they also believed that men only cared about a girl's face. How ridiculous. The relevant people had already gathered in the second branch's main courtyard, Plum Residence. When Jingwan and Madame Luo arrived, the second aunt of the Luo family was sitting arrogantly on the main seat. It was as if she was the owner of this place and was showing off her powerful presence to others. As for the others, they didn't look very good, especially Luo Jingming. His hair was still wet. If she remembered correctly, he should have changed his clothes. His face was a little pale, but there was an abnormal flush on his cheeks. It seemed that the effects of the medicine he had taken had not dissipated. She didn't know if he had been splashed with water or if he had swum in the water himself. When he saw Madame Luo, his aura weakened slightly. He stood up unwillingly and bowed with the others. Madame Luo's expression was indifferent. After she sat down, she asked, "What exactly do you want?" Second Miss Luo's breathing stagnated as if she had suffered a great blow. "Mother, what are you saying? Your granddaughter has been bullied to this extent and you're asking me what I want to do? What do I want to do? What can I do? I just want to seek justice for my pitiful daughter." Then he clenched his teeth and put on an extremely aggrieved look. "Justice? What kind of justice do you want?" Madame Luo's face was cold. Jingbo hurt her face. How can she get married in the future? Don't tell me we're just going to let it go like this? The Luo family's second grandaunt's voice was somewhat sharp. Luo Jingbo's face was gloomy. At this time he even wanted to disregard his status and beat her up. He was usually a free and easy person. Even though he had matured a lot after getting married, his nature was still somewhat casual. Now it could be seen that he was furious, but in the end he held it in. "Then why don't you tell me why Jingbo would hurt someone?" When Madame Luo asked this question, the Luo family's second grandaunt's face was full of resentment. She suddenly looked at Luo Jingming with a gaze that looked as if she wanted to eat him up. "You'll have to ask my good nephew about this. He's so black-hearted that he actually schemed against his own cousin. Lingshan's innocence was almost ruined by him." At this time Luo Jingming was feeling terrible. It was probably because of his family background. Among the three oldest brothers he was the most reserved. However, as the saying goes, even a person made of mud had a temper. He had suffered an unexpected calamity and was even blamed for it. Naturally his mood was not good. He glanced coldly at the Luo family's second grandaunt. "Is Chang Lingshan an outstanding beauty? Or is your Jiang family's high status worthy of him coveting her? Don't flatter yourself." In reality, even though Luo Jingming was the son of a concubine, his upbringing was not bad at all. His future might not be as good as Luo Jingbo's, but as long as he steadily walked down the path, his future would definitely not be bad. In addition, the Luo family's current momentum was great. There were too many people who wanted to form an alliance through marriage. However, the children of the Luo family who were not of age would directly reject marriage. Luo Jingming was very popular. The fact that he was the son of a concubine might have some impact, but he was personally taught by Luo Peishan just like the other two brothers. That little flaw was not enough to make a difference. Moreover, don't forget about those who had secretly pledged their allegiance to Jin Qinhuang. Their daughters could not enter Jin Qinhuang Fu. If they wanted to have a closer relationship with him, they would naturally have to slow down their efforts. The other princes would definitely not be able to do so. Jin Wangfei's maternal family was the best candidate. Thus, not to mention Luo Jingming, there was no need to worry about anyone else. Luo Jingming's marriage had long been put on the agenda. Now they had basically circled a few families and were only doing the final selection. Everyone's upbringing, talent, appearance, family background, and character all surpassed that of Chang Lingshan. Only water would enter his brain to plot against Chang Lingshan. Old Madame Luo also pointed out all these without any trace of politeness. Second eldest Miss Luo's face stiffened. Then tears streamed down her face. "Mother, I'm not your biological daughter. You really don't like me. My marriage is not as good as eldest sisters and third sisters, so be it. Now Lingshan is also. Enough. The children are here. I don't want to peel off your face." Second eldest Miss Luo's lips trembled, but she didn't dare to say anything else. Jingwan felt that it was strange. Although this second aunt was born of a concubine, she was raised by her grandmother. Everyone said that she and her grandmother were no different from biological mother and daughter. When she was in Cheat and Prefecture, Jingwan had heard about it from her grandmother's servants. Indeed, she wasn't considered bad. However, Jingwan could roughly sense that she wasn't particularly good. At least she couldn't compare to her other two aunts. Jingwan believed in her grandmother's character. Once she accepted her grandmother, she probably wouldn't treat her differently. Now it seemed that she didn't just dislike her. This second aunt must have done something to anger her grandmother and made her hate her. In fact, although second aunt's in-laws weren't as good as the other two sisters, second uncle's character was very good. Back then they were both chosen by Luo Peishan. At that time he was far from the position he was in today. Don't think that you're the only smart ones who treat the world as fools. You and your daughter's hearts are full of twists and turns, yet you dare to play around in front of me. If you wanted Jingming to marry Chang Lingshan, I would reluctantly look up to you. It's been almost 20 years and you still haven't changed. A good child was taught to be like this by you. Take Chang Lingshan and immediately get out of the Luo family. Remember this, even if she loses her innocence today, she can forget about entering the Luo family. Second eldest Miss Luo looked at old Madame Luo in disbelief. "Mother, you're actually so heartless? Indiscriminately convicting Lingshan, how could you? Old Madame Luo only looked at her indifferently as if she was looking at a stranger. She was probably really hurt by old Madame Luo's words. Her face broke down. "Mother, Luo Rongping and I are both born of a concubine. You even treat his concubine's son well, but you treat my legitimate daughter like this. Now get out of here obediently. The Luo family is still your maternal family, otherwise." Second eldest Miss Luo's face was green and white like a color palette. "You're actually so heartless. Fine, I'll leave. She wiped away her tears as if her heart was completely broken, revealing a sense of despair. Jingwan sighed. Sure enough, everyone was a king of acting. They were clearly afraid of grandmother's threat, afraid that they would really lose the Luo family, but they seemed to be sad and desperate because of grandmother's heartlessness. However, Jingwan looked at grandmother's eye with a little admiration. He was really domineering and mighty. Second eldest Miss Luo took the injured Chang Lingshan and left. Before leaving, she kept crying and making a fuss. In the end, she was directly slapped twice by her mother, scolding her for being a slut with a cheap life and for not being reincarnated into a good family. She deserved to end up like this today. Everyone knew that she was scolding Chang Lingshan for everyone present to hear. However, old Madame Luo was completely indifferent, so she had no choice but to leave. No matter how resentful and unwilling she was in her heart, she had to bow her head in front of power. Chang Lingshan was also a little pitiful. A large part of his brow bone was bandaged and the specific injury could not be seen. The area that was not covered was also red and swollen. As a result, there were 2 more palm prints on his face. However, this pitiful person must have something hateful. If she did not have any evil thoughts, this would not have happened. After sending them away, old Madame Luo stood up. There are still so many guests in the residence, go do what you need to do. You two brothers should properly reflect on today's matter. Both of you are so stupid. After Jingwan and old Madame Luo left, the remaining few people were still a little stunned. Was it over just like that? Luo Jinghua and Luo Jingming looked at each other. Indeed, they had both made stupid mistakes today. Luo Jingming had been easily tricked and Luo Jinghua was even more stupid. He did not have to involve himself at all. Other than letting Chang Lingshan get involved with him, it did not have any effect on the original matter at all. However, even if they were scolded for being stupid, they still admired their grandmother. She had resolved the matter so cleanly. They originally thought that it would be very troublesome, and they might really let a disgusting person into the family. Jingwan also had similar thoughts. She originally thought that it would be a tough battle and wanted to see if she could help a little. He just watched a show for free. She even left her sister-in-law with her biological grandmother in advance, worried that it would affect her. In the end, all her worries were in vain. However, old Madame Luo's words and deeds also told us that relatives were not easy to trick. Relatives were not easy to be ruthless, but it was also easier to be ruthless. There were some things that outsiders might have some misgivings about, such as today's matter. If it was someone else, old Madame Luo probably would not have handled it so simply and crudely. What is Wan thinking about? The matter just now, the result was expected, this process. Old Madame Luo laughed in spite of herself. Grandmother will tell you one thing today. When you can borrow power, don't be polite. When you can hold others, don't be soft-hearted, and even more so, don't be soft-hearted. Even if it was a former relative, when you want to control him, it already shows that he is not worth your effort. Therefore there is no need to be polite. Jin Qinhuang is a good banner. Chapter 224. How did it become Jin Qinhuang in the blink of an eye? Well, Jingwan also admitted that Jin Qinhuang's banner was very useful. She should be very happy to use it for herself. Grandmother was right, when needed it would be a waste not to use it. When they returned to Shiyuan, Sun Yijia sat next to her grandmother. She was a little restless and frequently looked in the direction of the back stairs. The drama on the stage, let alone seriously watching, she was afraid that she didn't even listen to a single word. Seeing Jingwan and old Madame Luo appear, she stood up and walked over quickly. Grandmother Wan Mimi. Old Madame Luo nodded and walked away. Jingwan also knew that she was anxious, so she simply whispered in her ear. Sun Yijia's eyes slightly widened, the corners of her mouth slightly hooked up. Grandmother is amazing. Jingwan smiled but didn't say anything. And she also thought so. The people here were all shrewd people. When old Madame Luo left, old Madame Sun sent someone to call Sun Yijia to her side. She sensed that something might have happened in the Luo family. But now that she was smiling so happily, it probably wasn't a big problem. After a glance, she no longer paid attention. Which family would be fine? In the entire capital, it wasn't like there weren't any families that were in turmoil every day. Jingwan helped Sun Yijia settle down and began to shuttle between the ladies with ease. One pulled her to say a few words, another pulled her to praise a few words. Although she could completely handle it, her face was stiff from smiling. It wasn't a smile of genuine joy. It wasn't just her face that was tired, it was also her heart. Jingwan felt that those people who were born with a smiling face would be a great weapon in this kind of situation. But that kind of person in a sad situation would be easily pointed out by everyone, so it was better not to be envious. Fortunately, when Jingwan felt that she couldn't hold on anymore, the banquet finally started. Similarly, many officials also came to the Luo family after leaving the yamen. After a round of toasting, although there were still a lot of things left on the table, especially the women's banquet in the back courtyard, it could be considered that the host and guests enjoyed themselves to the fullest. Except for a few small flaws, everything else could be said to be perfect. After the guests left one after another, Zhou Yingshuang, who was the guest of honor, and several other attendants helped to send the guests off. She also brought Yuan Qiao with her, intentionally or unintentionally. Of course, there was also her younger sister, Luo Jingyu, whom outsiders thought was completely beneath Jingwan's notice. Jingwan thought that Luo Jingyu's temperament was a little timid and dull, so she thought that after Sun Yijia married into the family she would ask her, the eldest sister-in-law of the second branch, to help train her. Sun Yijia didn't spend much time with Luo Jingyu. Most of the time, Luo Jingyu was taught by Sun Yijia's nanny. When the marriage discussion started next year, she probably wouldn't have to worry about in-laws. Concubine Ji was grateful to Jingwan because she knew that Jingwan didn't like concubines, so she never took the initiative to get close to her. Usually she helped Zhang Shi manage the second branch. Now she didn't want to have a son. She completely understood that as long as her two daughters weren't disliked by their sister, they wouldn't be bad in the future. Perhaps Third Miss didn't like the concubines' brothers and sisters, but she didn't like their status. She didn't have much dislike for them. As long as they didn't provoke her, she wouldn't do anything to them. When necessary, she would even help them. In order not to be a burden to her children, Concubine Ji became invisible in the Luo Rongyan. Concubine Ping, who gave birth to a son, had always followed Concubine Ji's lead in this aspect and was invisible in the entire second branch. When Great Elder Princess was about to leave, Wangzhu Yuyao made a fuss and refused to go back. Great Elder Princess indulged her and asked Jingwan to play with her for 2 days. Wangzhu Yuyao wasn't the youngest in Great Elder Princess's mansion, but she was the senior. Moreover, because her mother didn't like her sister-in-law, even if there were children who were 1 or 2 years younger than her, they couldn't play with her. Sometimes Yuyao was a little naughty. In fact, she didn't cause any harm, but she was regarded as a little devil by her nephews, nieces and sisters-in-law. Yuyao curled her lips. She didn't want to talk to them. Great Elder Princess looked at the girls in front of her kindly and said, "You are all good girls. If you have a chance, come to Great Elder Princess's mansion with Jingwan and play with her." Great Elder Princess loved Jingwan, and she was also supporting them in a disguised way. The girls were a little flattered and hurriedly thanked her. Great Elder Princess also gave Jingwan a few words of advice. In the end, only the relatives and friends of the Luo family were left. Even old Madame Sun didn't stay for long. Today she was the only one who came to the Luo family. The others in Ding General Manor were directly forbidden by her. According to her, she knew that Sun Yijiao was very good in the Luo family and this was enough. Jingwan's adulthood ceremony was so grand that some people would talk about it for a while. Among other things, as soon as Prince Rue and his wife returned to the prince's mansion, they were told by the servants that concubine Ying had a stomachache again. Princess Rue glanced at Prince Rue. Seeing that he didn't change his expression, she didn't say anything. Prince Rue didn't want to talk to her at first, but he seemed to think of something and asked, "Is she only a little younger than the third Miss Luo?" "It seems to be only a day younger," said Princess Rue. "A day? Only a day?" They were born under the same roof, have the same surname and eat the same food. But one of them is in the sky, the moon surrounded by stars, while the other is in the ground, deserted by all. Prince Rue seemed to be talking to himself. Obviously, the bigger the gap between Luo Jingying and Jingwan, the more unwilling he was in his heart. She doesn't know that today is her third sister's adulthood ceremony. Send someone to tell her and let her be happy for her third sister. Happy? It was more like he would go crazy. No matter what, she's still pregnant. No matter what, it's still your child. Is your heart so heartless? Aren't you afraid that if you do this too many times, there won't be any more children in this family? Your Highness is right. I will ask someone to talk to concubine Ying. She must be regretful that she didn't see it with her own eyes. Telling her in detail may give her some comfort. Yes. This was what he was most satisfied with about Princess Rue. She could always think of his thoughts and be of one mind with him. No matter how gentle and polite Li Hongming was to others, he wasn't a broad-minded person. Otherwise, he wouldn't have done this kind of thing. This was simply a method of jealousy in the inner house. You are a man who wants to control the world. Doing this kind of thing is really a bit despicable. However, Princess Rue didn't show it at all. She could roughly guess Li Hongming's mentality. Seeing how outstanding Luo Jingying was, compared to concubine Ying, he probably felt that he was cheated. Maybe he even thought that if it wasn't for Luo Jingying seducing him, it might be a different scene today. At the very least, he would lose his virginity before marriage. No matter what, he could still take her as a concubine and control the Luo family more than now. But he didn't think about it. If he didn't take the girl's body and Luo Jingshu was determined not to have anything to do with him, would she let her granddaughter be his concubine? The most innocent was still the child. Its mother was regarded as lowly and unscrupulous by its shameless father. And such a father didn't care about its existence. To be reincarnated into such a child, it probably had 8 lifetimes of bad luck. There were many capable people by Princess Rue's side. She casually ordered one of her mamas. However, this nanny had a grudge against Luo Jingying. When Luo Jingying was favored, Luo Jingying had ruthlessly humiliated her. She had always been proud of herself in front of the princess consort. Humiliating Luo Jingying was akin to killing one's mother and stealing one's child, so she bore a grudge against Luo Jingying. During this period of time she had secretly made trouble for Luo Jingying. However, Luo Jingying relied on the piece of meat in her belly and did not suffer too much. Now she had an opportunity to openly humiliate Luo Jingying. She found someone who was eloquent and sarcastic. She briefly explained the situation and asked those people to tell concubine Ying in detail. That woman understood tacitly and accepted the benefits. She patted her chest and promised that she would be satisfied. She obviously didn't see it with her own eyes, but based on the basic things she infinitely exaggerated and described it vividly, as if the scene was worthy of being crowned by the emperor. It was originally a story full of loopholes, but it was related to Luo Jingwan, her biggest enemy. Since birth they were destined to be incompatible. Naturally, if Luo Jingwan wasn't good she would be relieved. If Luo Jingwan was good she would be struck by lightning. She would never have a coming-of-age ceremony in this lifetime, not to mention endless glory, being surrounded by countless people, being envied by countless people, and receiving a mountain of precious gifts. She could easily bully and humiliate herself. The person who held the power to kill her also praised her. She tried every means to get something that she couldn't get, but she carefully placed it in front of her. She even had to worry whether she liked it or not. Why she roared, screamed and questioned, but she would never get an answer. Luo Jingying, whose temper had been somewhat restrained, flew into a rage and smashed everything in the room. She didn't know that she was injured. Because of the anger in her heart, Luo Jingying only came back to her senses when she felt a wave of heat overflowing from her lower body. Luo Jingying's face turned pale. She hugged her stomach and cried out in pain. Blood quickly dyed her dress red. It wasn't the first time that the people who served her had seen her go crazy, and it wasn't the first time that she saw blood. However, that child had always been lucky. After taking 2 doses of miscarriage prevention medicine, it would be fine. It gave people the illusion that her pregnancy was stable and nothing would happen to her no matter what. But this time was different from before. With so much blood, that child was most likely. The group of people were scared out of their wits. As for the person who had angered Luo Jingying, he had been smug at first, but now his legs and stomach were trembling. He took advantage of the chaos to slip out, but his heart was beating extremely fast. It was all over. His mind was blank and the only thing left was this thought. When Princess Rui learned that Luo Jingying had asked for a doctor again, she didn't even lift her eyelids. It was expected. But this time Princess Rui didn't wait for long. The servant girl trembled and reported. Princess Rui didn't wait for her to speak. Her heart thumped. She knew that this time it was probably not good. She hurried over. As soon as she stepped into the room, the servant who served her immediately knelt down. Princess Rui only felt that her legs were a little weak and her head was a little dizzy. The doctor came out and directly apologized to Princess Rui. "I'm incompetent. Princess, please forgive me." Princess Rui calmed down and rubbed her swollen and painful temples. "Where is Shirqie Ying?" "Princess, she's not well. She's unconscious." "Did the child fall out?" "Princess, the child is still in the belly." "Then quickly prescribe a dose of medicine to make the child fall out. Make sure that it's clean. Then take a good look at her. Don't leave a lasting illness that will affect her fertility in the future." "Yes." The doctor hurriedly wrote a prescription, filled the medicine, boiled the medicine, and then poured it down the throat of Luo Jingying, who was in a coma. Princess Rui had been sitting outside the whole time. She didn't say anything about leaving and she didn't ask the servant to leave. After the medicine was poured down the throat, she sent someone to inform Prince Rui. Prince Rui frowned, paused and decided to take a look. As soon as Li Hongming walked to the door, he heard an old maid in the room say in a trembling voice, "Princess, the child is born. It's a boy." Li Hongming staggered slightly and subconsciously clenched his fists. He thought that he wouldn't care about it, but the result was far from being as calm as he expected. Children were the inheritance of a man. Without children it was equal to cutting off the family line. He had 2 legitimate daughters and the others either died at birth or died in the belly. None of them was a boy. This was the first child confirmed to be a boy. If it was born safely, it would be his eldest son. It was okay when he didn't know, but now he knew. His heart was burning with pain. Seeing Prince Rui come in with a gloomy face, Princess Rui looked a little sad and said, "Your Highness, why is it gone?" His voice was frighteningly gloomy. Chapter 225. Princess Rui would not stupidly go against him at this time. This man had a great tolerance for her. The premise was that she was sensible enough and smart enough to know what to do and what not to do. If she crossed the line, she would not have a good ending. Prince Rui glanced at Princess Lu and directly grabbed a servant girl. The servant girl stammered and did not make it clear. As a result, Li Hongming directly ordered people to drag her out and beat her to death. Then the second servant girl was followed. The servant girl was afraid that she would end up like the first one, so she hurriedly spilled the beans. Li Hongming had realized that he was the cause. His face was so ugly that it was indescribable. But would he admit it? Absolutely not. He just asked people to tell Luo Jingying. That was all. Li Hongming glanced at Princess Lu sharply. Princess Lu twitched the corner of her mouth stiffly and said nothing. Li Hongming did not scold Princess Lu in the end. He just let it go. It was hard to get rid of the depression in his heart. I asked you to serve him, but you were lazy and didn't pay attention. Now that the child is dead, you should go down and continue to serve him. First, you should forgive him. Second, you should protect him from being bullied. Drag all of you out. Your Highness, please spare us. Your Highness, was it useful to beg for mercy? Of course it was useless. The guards beat them directly. They were not gentle at all. If they resisted and cried, the knives at their waists would hit their heads directly. Blood would immediately flow. Princess Lu slightly looked away. She did not want to see the bloody scene. Even if she had beaten servants to death and witnessed Zhang Wo's execution, she still could not adapt to such a scene. Would it be over after these people were beaten to death? There was still the culprit. As the most direct person to provoke Luo Jingying, the woman packed up her belongings and prepared to escape. However, when she finally found an opportunity to leave through the back door, she was caught just as she was about to step out of the door. Then she was dragged to Li Hongming. At this time, her head was covered in blood. Before Li Hongming could ask anything, she had already confessed that she was the mastermind. Princess Lu took a deep breath. At this point, she knew what Prince Rui was trying to do. Everything would be fine as long as this woman died obediently. Princess Lu wished she could strangle her to death. She could do nothing about it. Princess Lu's mammy also clearly knew what she was going to face. She obediently walked out and knelt down. She directly said that she had a grudge against concubine Ying, so she took the opportunity to take revenge on her. She was willing to accept the punishment. Compared to the others, he was unusually calm. Li Hongming naturally wouldn't be courteous to someone who had offered himself up to appease his anger. He waved his hand and ordered his men to take him away. Your Highness. Princess Lu finally couldn't help but stand up and grab the mammy. She looked at Prince Rui with pleading eyes. However, Li Hongming's eyes were extremely cold and sharp. He was not moved at all. Princess Lu's body trembled slightly. She grabbed her mammy's clothes and refused to let go. Because she used too much strength, her fingertips turned white. The mammy gently but firmly pushed Princess Lu's hands away. The prince lost his son. Although it was him, she was the one who was aggravated. He was just a servant. How could she compare with the royal grandson? Now she only hoped that her family would not be implicated. However, she didn't dare to ask for mercy in person. But she believed that the princess would protect her family. I can't continue to serve you in the future. Princess, take care. Princess Lu couldn't help but take 2 steps back. Tears fell down, but she quickly wiped them away. She didn't look at Prince Rui. Because once she did, she was afraid that she would show hatred in her eyes. This man was so cold and heartless. Li Hongming cleaned up the mess and left without looking back. He didn't even think of going in to see the woman who had just lost her child. The pain of losing his son seemed to have completely disappeared. Look, this was Prince Rui, who was highly praised by outsiders. In his eyes, there was only the high position. In fact, Princess Lu didn't know that the reason why Li Hongming was so angry was not only because of the child, but also because of Jingwan and Li Hongyuan, who embarrassed him. What was more, he was humiliated by Li Hongyuan's eyes. Except for her, there was no one else in the courtyard of Luo Jingying, including the person who was in charge of sweeping. The mess in the room had not been cleaned up. Princess Lu had a little sympathy for Luo Jingying before. After her mammy died, she was kind enough not to tear Luo Jingying apart. Anyway, the child was gone. From now on, she would not give Luo Jingying any protection. Yes, if Princess Lu secretly warned other people in the backyard, Luo Jingying would have had an abortion. Maybe she would have even lost her life. From now on, Luo Jingying could only fend for herself. However, didn't concubine Qi Ying love His Highness so much that she didn't care about anything else? However, His Highness revealed his true colors and beat her down to the ground. She survived and kept the child. Now because she heard news about her cousin, she had an abortion. Should it be said that her love was too shallow, or that her ruthlessness towards her cousin was too deep? Princess Lu left with her people and then casually arranged several people to serve Luo Jingying. When Luo Jingying woke up, there was only a strange little maid by the bed. But she was not in the mood to care about her for the time being. The first thing she did was to touch her belly. Her belly had been bulging. She had felt the movement in her belly. But it was gone. Her child was gone. Luo Jingying's expression was one of utter terror. From the moment she found out about the existence of the child, she didn't feel anything special. She only thought of it as a bargaining chip that could tie that man down and help her advance in her career. Later, she even thought of getting rid of the child because of Luo Jingwan's words. However, when she saw Prince Rui's heartlessness and hypocrisy, it could be said that she had nothing but the child in her womb. As the child grew up little by little and moved in her womb for the first time, she truly felt a different kind of emotion. It was indescribable, but her heart was filled with warmth, and she felt a sense of anticipation that she had never felt before. Now it was gone. Luo Jingying went crazy again. Regardless of her health, she broke the things that had just been put on the bed. The little maid originally wanted to stop her, but Luo Jingying was too scary in her eyes. She could only shrink in the corner for fear of hurting herself. The little maid, who had not been trained, did not have the consciousness of protecting her master loyally. There were several people outside, but they were obviously experienced. Hearing the noise in the room, they just stuck their heads out to take a look. Then they continued to eat melon seeds and chat leisurely. Their words were full of disdain for Luo Jingying. Princess Lu had no intention of suppressing everything that happened in this courtyard before. Therefore, the whole prince's mansion knew what should and should not know. This was also Princess Lu's clear attitude and position. Luo Jingying had lost her last trump card. She had no connections in the backyard of Prince Rui's mansion, no help, no help. She could only be trampled on. Many people were ready to have fun and watch a joke. Luo Jingying was in a bad physical condition now. Before she finished smashing, she felt dizzy and fell to the ground. There was little blood under her body again. The little maid who shrank in the corner came out cautiously, concubining. The little maid was just about to help her up when the people outside came in. A woman who looked a little mean hit the little maid with a broom. "Hurry up and clean up the room." But what? Hurry up and clean up. She hit the little maid twice again. The little maid was scared. She did not care about Luo Jingying anymore. These people were so fierce. The adult woman squatted down and looked at Luo Jingying with a smile. "Concubining, you'd better take it easy if you want to smash things. The princess has said that if you smash things there will be no more. You will have to wait until next month to get the quota. Today is only the 6th day of the new year." Luo Jingying might be a little stupid sometimes, but she was definitely smart now. She was very clear about her current situation. All the people who used to serve her were gone. They were either dead or sent to other places. She was completely alone. No, maybe she was alone from the beginning. There was no place for her in this prince's mansion. "Concubining, go back to bed," Luo Jingying said lightly. "Oh, Concubining, are you still putting on airs?" The woman was very disdainful. She even patted her face humiliatingly. Luo Jingying was not hysterical now. She was indifferent as if there was nothing. "I'm the aunt of the Minister of Person." The woman seemed to have heard the funniest joke in the world. Who in the prince's mansion doesn't know that you have a bad relationship with the Luo family? So what? My surname is Luo. As long as my surname is Luo, you lowly servants can't touch a single strand of my hair. I'm estranged from the Luo family. They don't want me, but they don't want the Luo family's face. You humiliate me, so to a certain extent, you humiliate the Luo family. Anyway, I have nothing now. Those who are barefooted are not afraid of those who wear shoes. I'll just hang myself. I want to see how the prince will explain it to the Luo family. Even if I die, there will be a group of people coming down to accompany me. Luo Jingying laughed sinisterly. It had to be said that Luo Jingying really stunned them. Yes, she had nothing, but her surname was a great weapon. The Luo family was now at the peak of their power. If one day they suddenly remembered that there was such an aunt, they would definitely be pushed out to apologize to the Luo family. Help me to the bed. Don't make me say the same thing a third time. The woman suppressed her anger and helped Luo Jingying up. She rudely put her on the bed. Give me the medicine. Luo Jingying was still arrogant and bossy without the slightest trace of politeness. She had already come to this point. She couldn't be treated well just because she showed weakness. Since that was the case, why should she feel wronged? She could live freely for one day. Then, the other concubines who came to see her make a fool of herself saw such a scene after entering the door. She should have been a person with a lot of negative emotions, but she looked quite leisurely. The new servant was ordered around by her with a sullen face. It was not what they expected. Chapter 226. You're finally here. You made me wait for so long. But it's good. I'm quite bored now. Luo Jingying was not angry at all when she saw them in the past. She was even in a good mood and waved at them. This was even more strange. Did she lose her mind after losing her child? However, this didn't seem like something a lunatic would do. For a moment no one spoke first. Luo Jingying sneered. She remembered how these people looked when they found out that she was pregnant. How they looked when they found out that she was pregnant but lost favor. Now they wanted to hit her when she was down. Before, because the child was still alive, she carefully protected it. Even if she was arrogant and domineering, she was more afraid in appearance and tried to stay as far away from them as possible. Now she did not care about anything. If others made her unhappy, then everyone would be unhappy together. But she was not in good health now and could not do anything for the time being. Wait until she recovered. Sure enough, even if she did not speak for a while, they could not help but be sarcastic after a while. Before losing her child, Luo Jingying might have been easily angered by them. Now she found that she did not feel anything, so she calmly listened to them scolding her without any vulgarities. Then when they finally seemed to realize that something was wrong, she slowly opened her mouth. You don't want to talk anymore? Then it's my turn to talk. I have no favor and the child is gone. The Luo family does not care about me at all. It's all right. Do you know why the Luo family does not care about me? It's because I'm blind and do not know what's good for me. Wang Yi wants to win over my grandfather, but unfortunately my grandfather has no intention of working for him. Wang Yi has his eyes on me, but he does not understand the situation. I have no place in my grandfather's heart. He should be more interested in Luo Jingwan. Luo Jingwan may be annoying, but she's a good judge of character. Our prince probably hasn't even come within 10 feet of my third sister. As she spoke, she burst into laughter. His Highness has tried every means to get close to the Luo family, and I'm the thread that's equivalent to nothing. However, if I die, this thread will be completely broken. Grandfather might even be able to use this as an excuse to become irreconcilable enemies with His Highness. Oh, now that I think about it, I actually have some use. We all know what kind of person His Highness is. If you let him miss the opportunity to become the Minister of the Ministry of Personnel, what will happen? I'm looking forward to it. The women were frightened. Luo Jingying was threatening them with death. They knew Wang Ye's nature. Originally, they thought it would be better if she died. If what she said was true, then she couldn't die. That feeling of having a fishbone stuck in their throat was really terrible. This is the Wang Fu. How can a person's death spread out? The Luo family doesn't care about you. Even if you turn into dust, the Luo family won't know. One of the women expressed her disdain for Luo Jingying's words. Is that so? Then let's try. Let's see if my mother will suddenly remember me. The women were speechless. A mother wouldn't forget her own child so easily. Until now, she didn't care about her child. They were afraid that she was being suppressed by her parents-in-law. But who could guarantee that there wouldn't be a day when she would loosen up? Not to mention that none of them had a maternal family. Even if they had a maternal family, they definitely wouldn't be able to contend against the Minister of the Ministry of Personnel. Seeing them leave dejectedly, Luo Jingying laughed heartily. Her laughter was very carefree, but to their ears, it was very ear-piercing. Does she really dare to seek death? When you have nothing left, then you will know whether she dares or not. But if you die, then so be it. There won't be a ripple. Luo Jingying laughed until tears came out of her eyes. Her voice stopped abruptly. All of you get out. Luo Jingying was now full of sarcasm. The servants couldn't wait to get away from her and quickly got out. When she was left alone, Luo Jingying curled up and cried silently. She missed the days in the Luo family very much. Even if she was angered by Luo Jingying time and time again, she still felt that it was wonderful when she thought about it now. She was still jealous of her, still hated her, but she also really missed her. At that time, when she knew that she was going to enter Prince Rui's mansion, she was arrogant and insufferably arrogant. She probably mocked her in her heart. No, she had always looked down on her and didn't take her seriously. Maybe she just watched for fun. A few months, just a few months. Thinking back to that time, she wanted to be the noblest woman in the world. Let everyone crawl at her feet, and let those who looked down on her beg for repentance. She was really too naive and ridiculous. At the beginning, when she fell out of favor, she still wanted to get back. But now she didn't even want to see that man. Without experiencing it, she wouldn't know how cruel the reality was. If she could have a chance, she would rather avoid Luo Jingwan and find a family of equal social status to marry. She didn't realize this at the moment before she lost her child. Otherwise, she wouldn't have heard that Jingwan's grand coming-of-age ceremony led to a miscarriage. Of course, this was only a trigger. In the final analysis, it was because she had seen red more than once, which affected the fetus. No matter how stable the fetus was, it couldn't stand such torment again and again. However, from now on, Luo Jingying showed her fierce fighting ability in the backyard of Prince Rui's mansion. She knew that someone was scheming against her secretly. She wouldn't play tricks. She would do it openly. She would suddenly rush into your room and smash it. Or she would hold a hairpin and pretend to be weak. She would scratch your face when you were unprepared. Or she would suddenly run out and hit you hard. She would be knocked into the water. Even if she was stopped again and again, the same thing wouldn't happen again. However, Li Hongming also knew that he couldn't let her die. If he locked her up, she would immediately kill herself in various ways. Each time she would be more ruthless than the last. Li Hongming's face darkened several times. He simply let it go and let Princess Lu deal with it. Luo Jingying behaved well in Princess Lu's place. She told Princess Lu that she would keep Li Hongming in the main courtyard and not let other women get close to him. Even if Princess Lu didn't have feelings for Prince Rui, it was still a great temptation. So she acquiesced. Luo Jingying didn't make trouble in daily life. However, once she knew that Prince Rui spent the night with a concubine, she would definitely make trouble for that concubine. With Princess Lu's help in secret, those concubines were all tortured miserably. When Li Hongming knew it, Luo Jingying loved him deeply. When he went to other women's places, she went crazy with jealousy. She would only stop when she couldn't touch the princess. In this aspect, men were always a little vain. There was no woman in the backyard that he cared about. In addition, Li Hongming's life outside was very bad. He made mistakes everywhere. He had been scolded by Lu Qingdi more than once. He was in a terrible fix. So he just let it be. He really didn't enter the concubine's room for several months. As for Luo Jingying, because of her miscarriage, no one had taken good care of her and left her with a chronic illness. If she was calm, it might have affected her fertility. However, she did not stop for a moment. Her body deteriorated day by day, but she did not care. Of course, these were all the stories in the future. A few days after Jingwan's adulthood ceremony, it was Double Ninth Festival. The custom of climbing the mountain was indispensable. Li Hongyuan went to the Luo family's house to pick her up on that day unscrupulously. A few days ago, Madame Luo had been angered by him once. So she let her go impatiently. Jingwan was taken to an uninhabited place by him and bullied again. Then, in a good mood, he took Jingwan to join the rest of the climbing team. They had a good time. The next day, Jingwan received 2 pieces of news before and after she went. First, Qin Jingmin and Li Ruyu would get married in 10 days. Second, Sun Yilin was sent out. No matter which news it was, it came suddenly. Although Qin Jingmin and Li Ruyu's marriage would happen sooner or later, there had been no news before. The 3 letters and 6 rights. They didn't hear about the first step. They were going to get married directly. After 10 days, there was no news of the betrothal gifts. Wasn't that surprising? There was also Sun Yilin. He was doing well in the internal court. Even if he was to be promoted because of the credit of the journey to the west, it seemed that there was no need for him to leave the capital and be sent out. Moreover, Ding General Manor was now in a period of internal strife. Many people had turned to him. If he just patted his butt and left, how could those people endure it? Chapter 227. Regardless of whether he was puzzled or enlightened, Sun Yilin had to leave the capital in 2 days. Before he left, he came to see Sun Yijia. Sun Yijia seemed to be in good spirits and seemed to be happy about leaving the capital to become an official. Sun Yijia didn't try to dissuade him. But did he have to leave in such a hurry? There were still 3 months before the new year. Couldn't he take up his post after the new year? Sun Yilin shook his head. He could feel that someone wanted him to leave. Although he did not know who it was, leaving the capital was not a bad thing for him. This world made him feel oppressed and painful. Although because she was here there was a hint of sweetness in the oppressive pain. The further he was away the more lovesick he would feel. However, he needed to do something to distract himself. Before he met Jingwan, his life's ambition was to build his country and rule the world. Jingwan's appearance gave his life a different kind of color. It came so suddenly, but it also failed so quickly. He had no choice but to bury it and let it hurt in his heart again and again. He didn't know if someone else would dig it out in the future. He was muddle-headed for a period of time. Then he suddenly thought that if he couldn't get back up, didn't achieve anything and disappeared in the crowd, one day when she talked about him she would only shake her head and sigh in disappointment. Then she would completely forget about him without leaving a trace. He felt his heart clench tightly. He didn't want to be forgotten by her. Even if he couldn't be by her side, he wanted to let her know about him from time to time. He wanted to be good enough to stand in a high position. Sun Yilin wasn't a person who buried everything for love. But now there was another reason for him to be more motivated. Sun Yilin didn't mention Jingwan, but Sun Yijia saw the unconcealable affection in his eyes. It made her heart soften. She wanted to ask Jingwan to come out and see him, but in the end she restrained herself. She also didn't like men to be fickle. However, if it was her brother who was trapped by his infatuation and couldn't walk out, she would rather he be more affectionate because he couldn't get what he wanted. Tell me, all the men in Duke Dingwa's residence from grandfather, father and other brothers were playboys. How could there be such an odd one? Sun Yijia accidentally muttered these words. Sun Yilin found it funny. If he was really a playboy, little sister, you probably wouldn't be close to fifth brother. Okay, I'm going back. Don't think about sending me off when I leave. I'll write you a letter after I settle down there. Sun Yijia sent Sun Yilin with tears in her eyes. The next day, Sun Yilin's residence, he would return to the capital for at least 3 years. The moment Jingwan heard the news, she didn't know what to feel. It was hard to describe. Then it was Qin Jingmin's wedding. The Luo family was very respectful and basically all of them went. However, no one went to Xianfang. Moreover, he was helping Luo Jingbo get married. This time he didn't ask the Luo brothers to help. To be precise, except for the necessary people, he was the only one in the wedding procession. The wedding procession looked very shabby. Their branch might not be rich, but it wasn't to this extent. They were clearly showing their displeasure. Jingwan was silent. She didn't know what to say, or perhaps she shouldn't say anything. Wedding banquet. Because it was truly a happy occasion, the atmosphere would be lively. Most of the people who came to the Qin family knew what was going on, especially the Qin family members themselves. They all had a straight face, not a single smile on their faces. It was better not to attend such a wedding. The wedding procession came back much earlier than expected. Prince Cheng's mansion, no, it seemed to be Duke Cheng's mansion now, was much smaller than the original mansion, so there was probably no one to block the door. If the groom decided to quit, it would be really embarrassing. Although Duke Cheng's mansion had a strong background, the fact that the wedding had been delayed until today was very clear. For example, if Emperor Lu Qing did not do anything, the Empress did not do anything, and Duke Ding's mansion did not do anything, it was just an empty shell with the name of Duke Cheng's mansion in name. When the bride came in, everyone found that she seemed to be swaying even when walking. The groom, Qin Jingmin, was expressionless. He held the end of the red silk and walked in front, completely ignoring the bride. Jingwan looked at Li Ruyu, who was covered with a veil, and frowned. She was so thin that her waist could be controlled with 2 hands. There was no news about her in the past few months. He guessed that she was living a bad life. She thought about the first time she saw her. She was also dressed in red, rude and arrogant, and her whip was fierce. No, forget it. Jingwan felt that she had no right to interfere in other people's business. Moreover, knowing that Qin Jingmin's thoughts were on her, She still went up to him to comfort him and ask him to live a good life. That was actually a very cruel thing to do. In the current situation, it was also very inappropriate behavior. The best thing to do was to stay far away and have nothing to do with each other. The next day, Jingwan heard that Qin Jingmin's wedding procession was similar to what she had expected. It was said that there were not many people from Duke Cheng's mansion. Even Ding General Manor only sent people to send gifts in a normal way. For the wedding banquet, there would be no one at all dressed up. In addition, his son-in-law was not respectful at all and did a perfunctory job of keeping up appearances. Duke Qing was so angry that his veins were bulging. He really wanted to beat Qin Jingmin up. Unfortunately, Qin Jingmin was very straightforward and even wanted Duke Qing to beat him up. He turned around and left. There was no need to pick him up. His wife was in tears and finally managed to persuade him to stay. When Qin Jingmin's temper became stubborn, it was also very troublesome. The days that followed were neither salty nor dull. Occasionally she would attend the chrysanthemum banquets of various families. Speaking of which, the Grand Secretary of the Cabinet had the most chrysanthemums and the most complete variety. In the past, when the chrysanthemums bloomed, he would often take them out to make people envious. Only this year so far there was no movement. Speaking of which, the Ruan family was in a precarious situation this year. Not to mention the flower appreciation banquet, there was no other birthday banquet. However, it was said that the Grand Secretary, who had always been stingy, had given several pots of famous chrysanthemums to the Minister of Personal Lord Luo. After asking around, it was said that it was to make amends. Many people believed it. Jingwan felt that there might be other reasons. However, since this treasure was in her hands, she would naturally take good care of it. When she brought the pot of Yaotai Jade Phoenix to the capital, there were only a few stems. Now it had grown into a large clump. The flowers bloomed and looked exceptionally beautiful. Looking at these flowers and plants, her mood could not help but become cheerful. The weather was gradually getting colder. Every family had started to cut winter clothes early. The Luo family was no exception. Previously, when they were cutting autumn clothes, Jingwan and the others were not in the capital. According to Madame Wang's wishes, they had to cut 2 more sets of winter clothes. Jingwan refused. In reality, she had a lot of money. The clothes she usually wore were all made by the people around her. She had as many as she wanted. Basically, she had never worn any of the common clothes. Jingwan didn't feel that she was wearing them, but Nanny Gong didn't like them. Moreover, the people around her knew her measurements very well. Every piece of clothing they made was just right and it was the most comfortable to wear. Thus, having more would be a waste. She asked she might as well not take any of them. However, there were many times when it was better not to refuse. Sun Yijia did not want a single piece. Her situation was special. Now that her belly was growing quickly and she did not lack those things. It could be said that she was cutting new clothes every few days. Now that she was taking measurements in the office, even if it was made bigger, it might not fit her. Her situation was similar to Jingwan's, so she really did not need to waste time. The young and old ladies were excitedly choosing cloth at Madame Luo's place. As the eldest of the unmarried ladies, Jingwan casually picked 2 bolts and let her younger sisters choose. There were many colors. In the end, they would always find something they liked. If 2 ladies liked the same color, they would just cut a set of clothes for the same color. The remaining ladies in the Luo family were not particularly competitive. They would not be estranged over a piece of cloth. Jingwan received a message from Yun Yang. She went to Rouge Pavilion and brought back a large amount of dividends. Jingwan used to think that she was a rich woman. Now she received too many good things. She did not want to estimate their value. She also packed a lot of rouge and face powder from Rouge Pavilion. When she took it back, each branch would send gifts to her. After Jingwan moved to the capital city, the madams and ladies of the Luo family saved a lot of money on rouge and face powder. The things they used were still the best. In the blink of an eye, it was the day before Zhou Yingshuang's wedding. Yuan Qiaoqiao asked Jingwan to add to her dowry. She asked Jingwan to bring Sun Yijia's dowry to the wedding. Before they left home, Wang Zhuyuyao came to them again. Since the first time she came to the Luo family, Wang Zhuyuyao came here every few days. Today, she was particularly confident that she would add to Miss Zhou's dowry on behalf of Princess Yu. Jingwan knew that she did this for her sake. It must be said that great elder princess was quite competent as Lin Mingya's foster mother. Because most of her relatives and friends were adding to her dowry on this day, when Jingwan and others came, many people were there. When they entered the room, everyone hurriedly stood up to greet them, especially Yu Yao. As the Wengzhu, she should accept the greetings. Yao might be a little impulsive in daily life, but when she was serious, she was very serious. She even had a little bit of great elder princess's shadow. In a short time she could be very intimidating. With regards to Yu Yao's arrival, especially when she stated her intentions, not to mention the relatives and friends of the Zhou family, even the people of the Zhou family were very surprised. She directly alarmed the old madam of the Zhou family. This was the honor that came with status. The gifts sent by great elder princess were certainly not shabby. They were opened on the spot, which made all the madams and ladies in the room envious. Many people were also curious about the gifts sent by Jingwan, but Zhou Yingshuang didn't open them. She knew that Jingwan was never a stingy person. Compared with great elder princess's gifts, her gifts were probably even better. If others saw them, it would be a slap in great elder princess's face. At that time it would be really embarrassing. Of course, there were also smart people who thought of this. They didn't join in the fun and even stood on Zhou Yingshuang's side to say something. The girl who spoke didn't realize it for a moment and was naturally unhappy. The faces of Zhou Yingshuang's mother and grandmother darkened one after another. Seeing that the atmosphere was not right, someone with a glib tongue helped to change the topic. Jingwan didn't say anything, because the gifts she prepared were more and more exquisite regardless of the value. Because there were quite a lot of people coming and going, Jingwan and others didn't stay long and said that they would come tomorrow morning. When almost all the people left, Mrs. Zhou walked into her daughter's room. Seeing Zhou Yingshuang touching a set of hair accessories, Mrs. Zhou's eyes flashed with surprise. Even the gifts she prepared for her daughter were not as good as this one. She walked forward and asked, "Is this a gift from Miss Luo?" Zhou Yingshuang looked up at her mother and nodded. Mrs. Zhou stroked her head and said, "Keep it well. Mother doesn't need to worry that you will suffer in the future. With such a handkerchief to support you, you are stronger than our Zhou family. This is also my son's fortune." Zhou Yingshuang nodded. He felt the same way. When she first became friends with Jingwan, it was only because their personalities were more compatible. Coupled with her relationship with Yuan Xiaoqiao, they got closer and closer. Who knew how many people envied her today? Zhou Yingshuang's heart was filled with sweetness. Jingwan came over early in the morning as she said. However, Mrs. Quan Fu was already wringing noodles for Zhou Yingshuang. She wrung out all the hair on her face. It was painful just looking at it. Jingwan touched her face. There was almost no hair on her face. When the time came, she shouldn't have to suffer. It was best to let Mrs. Quan Fu do the honors. She wrung the noodles and carefully combed her hair. When it was time to put on makeup, Zhou Yingshuang begged Jingwan to help her. Although it was against the rules, Mrs. Quan Fu didn't mind. Jingwan also readily agreed. She carefully put on makeup for her, covering up some small flaws. She also put on a light layer of blush according to her face shape. Her face was still the same face, but it looked more beautiful. Many people were amazed. No wonder the bride wanted Luo San Miss to help her with her makeup. If they were in her shoes, they would definitely do the same. When the groom lifts the veil, I don't know how happy he will be. Zhou Yingshuang blushed, adding a touch of color to her face. By the time everything was done, most of the people had left. Only Jingwan and a few others stayed behind to chat with her. Not to mention other things, just by listening to the movements outside, it was clear that this wedding was far from the one a few days ago. The groom is here. You're tuning in to the Biao's Wuxiao Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.